and their concerns. Thank you so much. We're going to start it off with an invocation for those who would like to join me. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to come together as a free people. We ask for your strength, your wisdom, and your guidance as we conduct the business of the people. Father, give us compassion, give us understanding, and give us tolerance as we move forward. And help us, Father, to make the right decisions that best benefits the citizens of our county. We thank you, Father, for all the many blessings, the uncalled upon blessings, the simple things in life that we take for granted. Thank you, O Father. And for it is in the name of my precious Lord I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Join me with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You like that? I believe you would be in the minority.
I'd like to recognize representing the election chamber tonight is our own Matt Sutter. Where you at, Matt? Okay, if you have not, please register if you want to speak at the public address. We've got a couple public hearings. We'll call the folks who want to speak at those public hearings in the course of calling that agenda. So if you want to speak about anything other than what's on those public hearings, you can register up here at the desk. Okay. Adoption of agenda due to the expected length of the public hearings. I am requesting that they be moved to follow the consent agenda. Are there any other changes for the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, in the order of the public hearing, what I'd like to do is, as a courtesy to I'd like to have the Buddy Lyons request heard last, since it's going to take the longest. The first two I don't think will take very long.
Okay.
Scott Smith and then H&A Investment.
So we're just going to move the Buddy Lyons public hearing to after the other two. Okay,
Yes,
got you. Okay.
In the middle,
Thanks.
it fits in.
Okay. If there are no other changes toward the agenda, can I have a motion and a second to approve the amended agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second. Motion by Commissioner Troy, second by Commissioner Yates. Cast your vote.
All of the votes are in,
Okay, is anyone registered to speak at public address?
and that motion carries 7-0.
We have Kathy Jordan. Ms. Jordan, we're videoing, so if you would, please give your name before you speak there, please.
Okay, Kathy Jordan.
Thank you, ma'am.
And you all asked me for some papers last night, so I'm following up. So I have 3 minutes. I was given a civil summons by planning and zoning because they said I wasn't a bona fide farm. The Department of Agriculture definition, to remind you, of a bona fide farm is different from the definition from the Davidson County ordinances. The Department of Agriculture definitions supersede anything that is their statutes supersede ordinances by the county, and I gave you that printout there from the government, so that you actually have it. I was just spouting numbers last time, so I gave that to you. So what I am facing is having to go to the Board of Adjusters to get them to correct the language in the zoning ordinance because, and I don't blame the zoning people, they're enforcing something that is poorly written. If they go back to those statutes that I give you there and look up what animals are on the list for bona fide farm animals, they'll see that the animals that I raise have been subsidized by the government since the 1920s as an agricultural commodity, a type of livestock that is within the realm of agricultural. So that is the dilemma that I'm facing. I'm bringing it before you. I would like you all to correct, if you could, the language in the zoning so that it is it mirrors and matches the language for the North Carolina Department of Agriculture. And all they have to do is a little drop down there that says, these animals are bona fide farm animals. I think that they confused the word specialty livestock, I'm guessing, with special, as requiring a special use zoning. Specialty livestock is recognized as bona fide farm animals. You know, that could be your miniature donkeys, people with alpacas, any of this. So that is specialty livestock, requiring a different level of care than your regular farm animals. That's why it's termed specialty. But it shouldn't have to have a special use zoning as per the Department of Agriculture. So it affects me. It theoretically could affect anybody raising rabbits. And Lord knows they sell 50-pound bags of rabbit feed in all the feed stores. People around here do raise rabbits. Alpacas and llamas and people who have compost farms. There's a person who raises worms in Davidson County for composting and for fishing. So theoretically, any of those people could be told, you need a special use permit as per the way it's written in the Davidson County zoning. For the Department of Agriculture, they said, no, you cannot supersede with your little ordinances the state regulations, the state statutes, which are in line with the federal statutes. So I would like that language, and I would just petition you to bring that language so that it matches the North Carolina Department of Agriculture for the animals that are actually bona fide farms, and that will alleviate perhaps the next person having to go to court or pay $250 to go to the Board of Adjusters, which I'm looking at doing now. I shouldn't have to do that. But maybe it will help the next guy. I'm probably still gonna have to go to court to get this
3
mess
minutes,
cleaned
Ms.
up.
Jordan.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Jordan. I'd request that, Chuck, if you and Casey could look at this and make sure we're in compliance, our ordinance. The last thing we do wanna do is make things more difficult than necessary. You know, sometimes it may be that we need to look at this and make sure if we're in agreement with the statute on this right here.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Jordan. Okay. Okay, Barney W. Hill.
That's me. What I have here is an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and 8.5 by 11 yellow sheet of paper. On that sheet of paper is drawn a 1 1/4 inch by 1 3/4 inch box. Within that box are the names of 5 people. 4 of those 5 people will be county commissioners in December. I have $107 additional 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper. These are white. On these sheets are written the text of tonight's agenda items: 9 Echo, 9 Foxtrot, 9 Golf, and 9 Hotel. What is making county government irrelevant is that the people who graduate from the yellow sheet cannot resist the lure of what is on the white sheets.
That is.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hill. Okay, items for decision. Are there any items to remove from the consent agenda for discussion? If not,
Mr. Chairman, I just want a point of clarification with Madam Clerk. Item 9L, I believe we had an email saying that was, okay, it is on here. This one's corrected. 2 purchases. I know at one point it was 1, so just wanted to make sure that was corrected. Okay.
okay.
That got corrected on Monday, and
Okay.
the agenda got reposted.
All right,
Got
thank
a
you, ma'am.
motion by Commissioner Yates. Do I have a second?
Second.
Get a second, Commissioner Troy. Cast your vote.
All votes are in, and that item carries 7-0.
That's a new one.
Okay. Public hearings. We have a rezoning request by Scott Smith, Clayton Homes of Lexington and Tyro Township containing 2¼ acres from RS to RA2. I declare the public hearing open. Guy, if you'll.
Just found my glasses. Okay. The first rezoning of 3 that you have tonight is a request by Scott Smith with Clayton Homes to rezone 2.25 acres more or less for property in Tyro Township, tax map 12 being a portion of lot 23. The property is located on the north side of Beaver Dam Creek Road, approximately 0.37 of a mile east of the Mount Carmel Road intersection. The address is 650 Beaver Dam Creek Road. The rezoning as it was originally presented is requested to change from RS Low Intensity Residential to that of RA2 Rural Agricultural District. The recommendation of the Planning Board that their meeting occurred on October the 2nd, but their recommendation was 5-0 to recommend approval, but their recommendation requested it be rezoned to RA1 as a result of staff comments that were at the Planning Board meeting. So the applicant and the property owner of record is Jerry A. Parks and Judy Parks, and Scott Smith is here with Clayton Homes. He is the Clayton Homes is selling them a double-wide manufactured home for the site, and so he's here to represent the property owners on this application.
Does the applicants,
they're agreeable to the RA1. The reason that staff recommended RA1 is because of the fact that RS is the county's highest and most protected zoning district, and rather than going down to the least restricted, I thought it made make it more compatible to go with the RA1, which is directly across the road, and then you have both sides of the road with the same zoning, and he'll be able to meet what his clients are wanting to do with the property, with the setup. And with the double-wide manufactured home, you have the tongue removed in it, and you put it on a permanent masonry foundation. So I think it would be more compatible with the area.
okay, thank you. Mr. Smith?
My name's Scott Smith, and I'm here just to represent the Parks. And basically what he said, we're just trying to put a double wide on this section right here. The landowner is Jerry Parks, and his son Darryl was one buying the home from us, and he's wanting to put it there beside his father so he can kind of look after him.
Okay. Any questions, Mr. Smith? Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
Anyone in the audience who wishes to speak in favor of or opposed? Barney W. Hill?
The application requested RA2. The legal notice advertised RA2, and it says RA2 on the agenda. RA2 also would establish actual, not virtual, contiguity with the surrounding area. but the applicant has agreed to RA1. And I always agree with the applicant. I would prefer that we go to the very least restrictive, but the applicant rules. And I'm in favor of what he has, expressed as his preference.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Mr. Cornwell, staff recommendation?
Well, again, we have a policy statement 7.3 that states, generally speaking, that land uses on opposing sides of the same street right-of-way should be of a compatible nature. And so, given the fact that we have a large RA1 district on the opposite side of the highway on your zoning map, it is true that it is contiguous to the RA2 to the west and also behind the property to the north, but again, because it is currently zoned RS, I think it fits the criteria better to go to RA1. We also have a policy statement that states that manufactured housing may be located according to appearance criteria and development standards with nearby properties, and so I feel like the RA1 would meet that policy statement. So at this time, we're recommending approval of the property to be rezoned to RA1 Rural Agricultural District.
Okay, any further discussion by the board?
No, I believe there's, already one right next door to where this one's going, is that correct?
It's zoned actually RA2 to the west side of the property, Commissioner Krotz, but again, you have a strip of RS to the east going in the opposite direction, but then across Beaver Dam Creek, all of that property is zoned RA1.
Right, but that entire area over there's got a lot of mixed stuff in it, but, if there's no other further, stuff, whenever you're ready, I'll make a motion to pass that one, with the consistency.
I got just one question. The RA2, can he would qualify for either one, RA1 or 2, wouldn't he?
Well, you could legally, rezone it too. There is a legal precedence because it's contiguous to RA2. I'm just saying that our land development plan more or less supports, for compatibility. As you know, you have to adopt a resolution of consistency, and I feel like the RA1 would be more compatible and more consistent with what our land development plan is trying to accomplish for the area.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, I declare the public hearing closed. Have a motion by Commissioner Krotz. If I understand your motion, Commissioner Krotz, rezoning request, you approve the rezoning request and adopt the resolution on statement of consistency, is that correct?
Yes, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we've got a motion, Commissioner Cross, second by Commissioner Jarvis. Cast your vote.
I got your motion. Thank you. All of the votes are in, and that motion carries 7-0.
Okay, we're gonna step over, Ms. Smith, that passed? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We'll jump over B to C. Rezone request by EH&A Investments, LLC, Wayne Schuler in Thomasville Township containing 2 and 5.54 acres from RA3 to HC. I declare the public hearing open. Guy?
Sure. Just for the record, you do have a request by EH&A Investments, LLC, and Mr. Wayne Schuler to rezone property in Thomasville Township, tax map 332, being lots 69, 70, and 71, containing a total of 2.54 acres, more or less. Property is located on the south side of Schuler Road, approximately 0.19 of a mile west of the U.S. Highway 2970 intersection. That's also Business 85. You have a rezoning is requested change from RA3 to HC Highway Commercial. The recommendation of the planning board on October the 2nd was to recommend approval, unanimous 5-0. I think all the board members are familiar with the Business 85 corridor and the location of Schuler Meats, which is a growing business in the Thomasville area. And, going to the west here, this is Schuler Road. A few years back, the applicant will, remind the board, but he did ask for this area to, across the road from his current business to be rezoned highway commercial because he, has a fleet of trucks that he uses to distribute his meats and, produce. And so, that area was zoned a few years back to highway commercial. And then the lots that he is requesting are some 3 additional lots that extend further down Schuler Road on the south side of the road or the west side of the road. But it is contiguous to existing HC, so he's simply asking to extend that existing HC district.
Am I to understand that the conditions are the 50-foot buffer?
Well, this is not a conditional use request, so we can't, require that, but, as a courtesy to the adjoining, property owner, he did say that he, could leave a strip of trees there as a buffer, but we cannot make him do that.
Okay, I knew I'd read that. I didn't know if it was, agreed upon provision or what. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, can we cut 50 foot back out of that highway commercial rezoning?
You could do that.
And if you do that, then he can't put anything over there and it keeps the 50 feet in there. Which I think he would follow through, but, what happens 10 years down the road, somebody else may buy it.
Yeah.
And if you take that 50 foot out, then you leave that buffer in there.
He owns about everything else there, I don't see the need to.
Okay. Mr. Schuler?
I know he owns about everything up there. Yeah.
Should go in business.
I'll take the man at his word.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I take him, I'm saying, 10 years down the road.
Thank you, gentlemen, for y'all's consideration. My name is Wayne Schuler. What we're wanting to do is we're asking for the, as you said earlier.
It's the red,
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
We're wanting to extend what is zoned highway commercial here. We want to extend it down to here. If we actually take 50 foot off, that may cramp us at some point in time. I don't have a problem with leaving a tree line there, but 50 foot is quite a bit, because we're only talking about, a little over 2 acres here. That may hurt our abilities to put, a garage facility there, and that's what we're looking at doing. Again, I think 50 foot might hurt us some, but as far as me agreeing to a tree line, I don't have a problem with that. I would want to communicate with the neighbors and see kind of what they wanted, because obviously we want to make it work. We're a family business, and they come in our store, they trade with us, and they're friends, so we want to make it work for them as well.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Any question about the board for Ms. Schuler?
Thank you, do a great job.
Thank you, Ms. Schuler.
Thank y'all for your consideration.
Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak either in favor of or in opposition to this request? Mr. Medley?
Oh, you got Mr. Hill wanting to speak.
I'm in lot 72, right next to lot 71, and my house is within 50 feet of the line, and my bedroom's like right on that side of the house also. Right now, we have the refrigerator trucks, they run all night long, so I sleep with earplugs in because of the noise, but I understand he wants to build a garage there, but if we could do the 50 foot and change it so that it could not go past that and put that as part of the zoning, that'd be great. I don't have any reason to think Mr. Schuler won't be a man of his word, but there aren't really even any trees on that 50 foot border right there. It's about 15 or 20 feet in before we even get to trees. So my concern is just my property is right on the edge of that. My garage is right on the edge of it. I'm not okay with it.
Okay.
Okay. Barney Hill? Barney W. Hill?
This is the only time I've ever seen the planning board have to come up with policies to contradict the policies cited by the planning staff. The staff cited 2 policies involving encroachment. But as we've just heard, you can't encroach something that's already been encroached. And I would have thought the noise from the highway and the other businesses would have drowned out the sound of the refrigeration units. On another point, both the staff and the board were wrong, and there's been some more wrong here tonight. The implied threat that a favorable recommendation would be withheld unless the applicant agreed to the buffer is what Chrisman versus Guilford County called illegal contract zoning. The government is bargaining away its authority that's supposed to be sovereign. If the Schuler property is not properly HC, nothing is. I speak in favor of whatever Mr. Schuler figures out he wants.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Okay. Is the applicant wishes to say, have any further? Mr. Schuler, do you have anything else you would like to add to this after hearing the comments?
I have a question for Mr. Schuler, if that's okay. I do. I think that might fix the problem.
I've seen a hand go by just for reference. Are you wishing to speak about this? Okay.
Mr. Schuler, when you build your, I'm over here. Sorry, yeah. When, I know the speakers, you can't really tell. When you build your garage, do you think that will fix, because I understand your refrigerator units are gonna be up on the other side, but when you build a garage, that would probably hinder some of the sound that your neighbors have now.
It would probably be a barrier,
Right.
to sound, as we would put a building or two there. It would probably break that sound up, because we wouldn't be having trucks over there that, with the refrigeration unit running, obviously, if they're being worked on.
Right, and you're not gonna operate that garage at night, that would be a
No.
daytime operation,
No.
okay. Would that help you out, sir? Yeah, if it's not operating at night, that's fine. Okay, all right, there we go. All right,
Mr. Medlin, I could never tell you honestly that we would never work on a truck at night. I wouldn't be the man that I'm supposed to be if I said a truck wasn't gonna break down and us to have to do something at night. But it will not be our intentions to be working at night. We'll wanna repair our trucks, on a normal schedule. But I could never tell you that we would never have a truck break down and us have to work on it one night. I mean, it would not be a norm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you both.
I got a question for you, Mr. Schuler.
Yes, sir.
Those, refrigeration units, do they not plug into electricity, at night?
You can, some of the older ones could. They've got now what they call is smart units, and so they only run as needed. Back in the day, we'd plug them in and they would run all night, after they was loaded. But now they have what is called smart reefers, and they only run, according to the temperature on the truck. So they don't run
Crank up
nearly.
and shut off and crank up and shut off.
They don't run nothing like they used to run.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Schuler.
Thank you.
Gentleman back there, you need to say anything? Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Okay. Mr. Corman, what is staff recommendation for this?
Sure. There are a couple of policy statements that I will read to the board that conflict with what he's requesting, but with what's been discussed here, it says that highway-oriented commercial uses should be clustered along segments of highways and contain land uses which are mutually compatible and reinforcing in use and design, and that they should be encouraged to develop by consolidation and expansion of existing commercially zoned property when such consolidation and expansion does not encroach upon viable residential areas. And the problem that we have here is that you do have a residential area further down Schuler Road. The other thing that you have is that policy 5.3 says that new incompatible commercial encroachment within or immediately adjoining any existing residential areas shall be strongly discouraged, meaning that you shouldn't try to, encourage commercial development to encroach on viable areas there. But given the fact that it is contiguous to the existing HC commercial district, and I must remind the board that this is not a conditional use request. It is one that you have to consider all of the uses that are allowed in an HC district when you make your decision on this. But it is a fact that Mr. Schuler has been out there for over 30 years. Mr. Schuler, 36 years, and I think he's going to continue out there. But on his statement to the gentleman who had the concern but I would recommend approval of the request, being that it is contiguous, and I know this county and board is pro business and supports small businesses.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kennedy.
Without the recommendation.
My recommendation is to recommend approval.
But without the 50-foot?
We cannot require you have to either go with what or
Because I was noticing in reading the planning board minutes that they included that in their motion, and
but they couldn't,
it's not enforceable.
It's not enforceable.
Sometimes the character of a person, when Mr. Schuler turned around and addressed Mr. Medlin back there, he didn't have to do that. But he told him the truth, said, I can't tell you that one of my trucks is not going to break down. And I think that makes for a good relationship. I'm hoping, Mr. Medlin, that if you got a problem, I think you can go to Mr. Schuler and he'll do everything he can to address that problem. Okay, is there any further discussion by the board? If not,
Mr. Chairman, I would like to recuse myself from the vote on this due to potential financial conflict.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, could we have one moment, please?
Certainly.
Excuse me. What is your potential financial conflict? Okay.
No, I don't have any conflicts tonight.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize.
I was being nosy, trying to figure out what y'all were over here talking about.
I thought there was an issue.
Okay, we have Commissioner.
To recuse.
Okay, we've got a motion by Commissioner McClure to recuse. Commissioner Jarvis, do we have a second?
Second.
Got a second by Commissioner Yates. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. All right, I declare the public hearing closed. Can I have a motion second to either approve or deny this rezoning request and to adopt the resolution on statement of consistency?
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Got a motion, Commissioner Yates. Do I have a second?
Second.
Got a second, Commissioner McClure. Cast your vote.
All of the votes are in. And that motion carries 6-0.
Okay, Mr. Schuler, it's been approved? Okay, all right. Next item on the agenda is the rezoning request by Buddy Lines and Leo and Terra Development, Inc. in Arcadia Township containing 213.15 acres from RA3 to MX4R. I declare the public hearing open. Guy?
believe Schuler's got one of them things hooked up this building.
Okay, you have a request by Buddy Lyons with Leo Terra Development Incorporated to rezone property containing 211.21 acres, more or less, in Arcadia Township, tax map 6, being lots 23 and 23A, tax map 12, lots 53 and 54. The property is located on the east and west side of the Heggie Road, approximately 0.67 of a mile northwest of the South Union Grove Road intersection. The address of the area is 756 Heggie Road. The rezoning is requested to change from RA3 Rural Agricultural District to that of the MXR Mixed Use Residential District. Mr. Lyons is here as president of Leo Terra Development. He is also joined by David B. Coe, who is his professional land surveyor for the project. I should also tell the board that the planning board has met twice on this application. We met originally on October the 2nd at 6 p.m. and tabled it at that time so that we would allow the applicant to prepare a traffic impact study, which is not always required of every developer, but given the size and the scope of the application, I felt like it would be contain essential information regarding the impact that the traffic may have on the particular roads in the area. So he did employ Mr. John Davenport firm. He is a professional engineer and a former Division 9 traffic operations engineer for this area. And I think we included that study as part of your information. But as a result of that study and continued discussion, the pros and cons of the proposed project, Mr. Lyons also during the course of this application had some meetings outside the planning board meetings with adjoining property owners and other people of the area, and but the recommendation of the planning board on October the 16th, on October the 16th, I'm sorry, was 4-1 to recommend to grant the request as it was presented. There was one dissenting vote, and that was Chairman Steve Long, who at the time did not express his exact reason why he voted against it, but he did have some comments during the meeting concerning emergency services being able to get to a site when needed.
Okay. Before we get into this, in the interest of transparency, I just want everybody in this room to know, and my fellow commissioners up here, I own property on Heggie Road. It does not join the property. I have no financial interest and do not stand to gain by any measure with this, and I will conduct myself as a professional. I will listen to all the reasoning, and I'll make a determination based on the information that's supplied tonight. That's my promise to you. Okay, Mr. Lyons.
While Mr. Coe is coming up here, I wanted to also make sure that the board understood that this is a special zoning district that's in our zoning ordinance to allow the flexibility of the lot sizes, and it's an option that is included in both our zoning ordinance and our subdivision ordinance. This is in a protected water supply watershed area, which means for years, as you know, when the county had the minimum 40,000 square foot lot size requirement inside the watershed, it was one dwelling unit per 40,000 square feet. Since that time, the county, prior to the departure of Commissioner Larry Potts at the time, before he left the board sitting board at that time, amended the ordinance and changed the minimum lot size to 20,000 square feet, so that so because this is in a protected water supply watershed, the absolute maximum number of dwelling units is 2 dwelling units per 40,000 square feet. So the overall density is not to exceed 2 dwelling units per acre, and the current plan that you have will meet that requirement.
So even if there's sewer, you can't build over?
That's right. That's right. But there is public sewer, and that is a requirement for this particular zoning district.
Before we get started on that, just a question we had on the allocation agreement with the city of Winston-Salem. Takes us down to 540,000 gallons a day. What's the staff, view on what kind of impact that'll have on future development,
Do you
if
want to
any?
address that, Scott, since you work with it every day?
Sure. Mr. McClure, we've had the agreement since I think around 2001. So it's taken the 17 years to take roughly half of the 1.5 that we have. Obviously, these large developments really chew into it. And looking at the overall part of Arcadia, mainly where these sewer lines are, there are still several hundreds of acres available for development. What we have reached within a verbal agreement with the city of Winston is that we can go to the city and either ask for additional allocation, or once these projects finish and are completed, we can actually run the numbers off the meter of what's running through the pipes, where we may have in this site 124,000 gallons on paper. When it's done, there may only be 80,000 actually there, and they'll reconcile with us. They've agreed to do that.
That was one of my next questions, was there's an opportunity, excuse me, for us to get that revised.
Yes, sir. Scott, one other quick question. Is there much potential area for industry? Will it impact the industry as far as sewer goes?
I don't believe there's a lot of potential for industry where the current sewer line is located. We have the Millers Creek Business Park that is still available, but more people are going in there trying to get residential to occur. So it just seems like residential is the main demand. We haven't heard of any other industry in the area that is wanting to go where the sewer line currently is running.
Because I know they can impact
very much so.
Take a big impact on sewer.
Yes, sir.
Scott, one last question, one for me, it might be another question up here, but, I know that you said that you can go in and look at how much is going through the pipes. How often is that done for existing, customers? 'Cause I know I was on the Winston-Salem sewer system, and my water bill might be $18, but total, it ranged from $130 to $198.
We had that same concern raised at the planning board on October the 2nd, I believe it was, and Scott did some checking, and so he'll explain.
And I know it's based on our consumption, but how often do we go back and fix that for the customers that's having to pay those bills? Because I was even picking with Ron Sink one time and said, I even go to Sheets and use the bathroom because it's sewer, and of course he thought I was being serious and then went into detail, but I mean, I look at that and I find that just absurd to pay that kind of premium.
The only thing that I know that we are checking with these high sewer bills, not only with the consumption, if there are large levels of consumption, Davidson Water, as well as our sewer individuals who maintain the lines, will go out to make sure that the individual is not using irrigation on their yards, because that tends to make it go much higher. The way this is billed, for the first 2,000 gallons that you use in your home, you're charged a base rate of $31. And then every 1,000 gallons over that, it's $16 additional dollars. One of the gentlemen that was here during the first planning board, when I called Davidson Water, he had used 12,000 gallons over a month. That's why his was over $200. But he was irrigating. And Davidson Water tries to get you to buy a second meter to irrigate your property. Of course, you have to buy the meter.
$1,750.
Yes, so it is high, it is high. But my understanding is the reason the county has to charge so much is because the city of Winston charges us to treat it, and they go up almost yearly. And we
Right.
have to keep going up as well.
And it was me and 2 kids, and we didn't irrigate, and I even took my car somewhere else to wash it. I was trying to cut back on water, and it was still close to $200, so.
I have one other question. Guy, you went through a big explanation of the, rezoning and the 20,000 square feet. This is just a question to start with, but if this zoning is not approved, he can still develop that property.
Yes,
Is
sir.
that correct?
That is correct.
What would be the difference in the number of units, just about 50, 60? It's hard to say, but I'm just asking for an estimate.
Yeah, and Mr. Coe, I think, is going to address that as part of his presentation, but.
Oh, okay, then I'll wait.
Well, one last thing for Guy, if we don't approve it, and then they do a subdivision, then they still have to get approval from us to get onto the sewer system, right?
Yeah, they still have to get a sewer
Right,
approval.
but if
Yes,
they do
sir.
a subdivision and we don't give them the sewer, they'd have to do septic. Okay,
Yeah.
all right, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Lyons?
I'm not Mr. Lyons, but I do work for Mr. Lyons.
All right.
I'm Brad Coe.
Brad, you're Brad.
I'm a
Okay.
land surveyor. I've been in front of you guys many times over the years. Tonight, we're here to talk about rezoning one piece of property. What is the proper, best, highest and best use of this particular piece of property? There have been 2 planning board meetings, and much of the talk in opposition to the rezoning of this parcel dealt with schools, impact on schools, and roads, impact on infrastructure. And I'm here tonight to remind all of us that those concerns, though valid, are not predicated upon the approval of this rezoning. Those concerns are countywide and the consequence of a vibrant economy. A couple of years ago, we had an election, and my phone has rung more and more and more every day since that election. I had one of my employees count up, and I know I'm not the only person doing subdivision work in Davidson County, but somewhere between 350 and 425 lots that I will do in Davidson County, independent and irrespective of this project, within the next 12 months. We'll go on record. So countywide, we've got school impact, we've got infrastructure impact. These are things that are going to have to be dealt with because we have a vibrant economy. I've got subdivisions that, single family housing, different people have different numbers. It accounts for approximately 1/3 of our economy. It drives a lot of our economic engine. I've got subdivisions that have had to wait because Duke Power ran out of transformers. I've got subdivisions that have had to wait because concrete pipe couldn't. This is the level of activity that's going on in the single-family housing world, not just in Davidson County. I didn't add up the ones I've got going in Guilford and Forsyth and Yadkin and Davie. So we've got to deal with these issues. Not all consequences of a strong economy are pleasant. Children grow and they need new shoes. So we're going to have to deal with school impact. We're going to have to deal with infrastructure, roads and so forth and so on as a consequence of growth, which we all want and desire. But particular to this individual rezoning, there's been arguments, well, we hear this national builder's coming in here. Well, probably, maybe, likely, possibly. Mr. Lyons is a developer. He'll get up here and speak for himself and his company. He develops and he sells lots to builders. An argument's been made, well, these regional developers or these national developers, they come in and they're from out of state or out of county or well, that is not as if it has no economic impact on the county. They don't bring sheetrock guys from Arkansas. They don't bring plumbers from Oregon. They employ local people to do the work. They buy materials at local stores. The economic impact is equivalent during the construction process. We're we're kind of, now to be specific to this request, specific to this rezoning request tonight, what we're here for. This began with me working on behalf of Mr. Lyons with the staff to develop a site plan, one that I actually really like. Because of the size of it, we took a step that is not normally taken, and we had a technical review committee meeting. I'm gonna go to the site plan if I can figure out how to use this technology. This is a site plan. We went to TRC, and in technical review committee, we had representatives from Davidson Sewer, Davidson Water, emergency services, 911 was represented, planning staff was represented. DOT attended the meeting. I met DOT prior to the TRC meeting on site to look at the proposed entrances for site distance. And Davis County Inspections Department sent representatives to the TRC meeting. And I think I can say very truthfully that everyone walked out of the technical review committee meeting with a really good feeling about this site plan. During that site plan, during the TRC meeting, one comment was made about the site plan, one request which we made, is the red dot the laser? Okay. Yeah. We added this connection. An original site plan development, we wanted to avoid all impact to any creeks whatsoever, and I just hit the wrong button. Somebody might have to teach me how to run this thing. Back it up. Go backwards. Okay. One more. There we go. We wanted to avoid all impact to any creeks whatsoever, but we did add this connection, which is one creek crossing, which is allowable. You can have 150 linear feet of stream impact per project under nationwide permit. So we did add that connection because what it does is allow for emergency vehicle access both from the north end of Hagee, down Hagee, and into the subdivision. Say if this road was blocked, you can get in this way. If this road was blocked, you can get in, well, if that road's blocked, you can get in from the south. So you can get to all parts of the subdivision from two directions. That was something that emergency services wanted to see, and which we added. Also, Davidson Water wanted to see that because it helps maintain water pressure to loop the water line in two ovals on each side. So Davidson Water said they can serve it. Davidson Sewer says they can serve it. Came out of TRC with really good reviews and really good comments. Staff will comment in a little while on findings related to the ordinance, and I and the developer believe that this site is compatible with all requirements of the ordinance to be rezoned to MXR. The MXR was put in the ordinance to encourage, and the ordinance speaks to that. Mr. Lyons will read part of that in a little while, to encourage this type of development in this type of area. Why? Well, I've used this analogy, which I made up myself. We can suppose that in North Carolina over the next 10 years there might be perhaps 100,000 homes built as the state grows, as people move into the city. I made that number up because it's easy math. But we got 100 counties, 1,000 homes county, 10 years, 100,000 homes. The question is, do we want those 100,000 homes to consume 100,000 acres? Or do we want those 100,000 homes to consume fewer acres and have more common open space? I have become, over my years of being a land surveyor and a land planner, a strong advocate of putting the houses closer together on smaller lots and having more open space, the MXR zoning. We've done it multiple times in multiple counties. It's something that the planning departments encourage. It's something that I find that many people, not all people, I live on a farm. I like my farm. I can't see my neighbors. That's my choice. But many people don't want to maintain as much property as I myself do. Many people want to maintain less property. Many people want the uniformity of control that comes with this type of development. This is a proposed single-family townhome subdivision. So what we're proposing here is not that these people have fee simple title or ownership of individual lots. Rather, multiple plats have to be recorded as homes are built. You own a footprint, you own an envelope underneath your house. Everything else in the whole subdivision is either limited common area or common area. What that means is that the homeowner association has much more control over uniformity and quality of care over the entire property than in a conventional subdivision where you only have restrictive covenants, which are enforceable, of course, only by civil action. So you've got a more unified control. People move into these types of communities that look to do less yard work, less maintenance, enjoy their home. We acknowledge that there will be impact to schools. There will be children that live in some of these homes. But if rezoned, instead of doing it use by right subdivision, which, by the way, to answer your question, I have not drawn a plan to do this thing in 20,000 square foot lots. We did draw one to increase the road infrastructure to allow for it. I estimate 15% decrease, along with around the number that you brought out. Somewhere around 15% fewer if we do it use by right conventional subdivision. But we feel this is much more environmentally sensitive, much more compatible, makes a much more desirable subdivision for people to live in. Done this way, the way Mr. Lyons chooses to market this subdivision, we hope to get, and perhaps it'll be stronger, perhaps it'll be less, about a 30% what we call active adult purchaser. Active adults don't have kids living at home going to school. They make fewer trips up and down the road. Conventional subdivision, traditional wisdom, a little more kids per house, a little more. So you can cut the numbers down a little, but the impact might remain roughly equivalent. Finally, we did have a traffic study done by Davenport, that's the go-to name for the Piedmont Triad area. They're the most respected and most practiced traffic engineers available. And what you've got the report, I don't have it in front of me, but the statistic that I brought to myself from it, there's a lot of complicated information in there, is that leaving Hagee and going, they predict that 80% roughly, and I'm not looking at it, you can check my numbers, about 80% of the traffic will leave and go up Hagee to Hartman/Union Grove Road, of which about 60% will travel west toward 150 and about 40% will travel east toward 52 or Midway. Hagee Road, certainly they found could support the traffic generated by this subdivision. We were more concerned about what the numbers would be on Hartman/Union Grove, and their report says that it's currently slightly under 30% of its capacity, and this subdivision will take it to a little over 30%. I think
33%.
33 is the number I memorized. The guy confirms that. So certainly well within the ability to handle the traffic generated by the subdivision. I'm going to stop there for now and let Mr. Lyons come up. We appreciate the opportunity to be here this afternoon to present this, and we hope you find in favor of it.
Forward, back, and that's the laser printer.
I'll ask you again in 2 minutes. First thing I want to pass out, and I called Scott and talked to him about it. There was a lot of discussion about conditions and site plan modifications. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that. I know we'd actually talked about a motion, if these can be read into the record or not. But let me pass them around and go over them.
Yeah, you can go ahead and let's give. I have a copy. Let's Harris have one. Sir.
Thank you, sir.
I'll say a word about this, and then I'm going to defer to the county attorney when he feels like he wants to discuss this. These were additional restrictions that the developer has, after meeting with several of the adjoining property owners, has asked to include in the application after looking over the ordinance and looking over the procedures, we find no reason not to allow him to include, these additional, restrictions. But I'm going to, allow him to, with the county attorney's permission, allow him to speak about it, but then County Attorney Fry may have some comments about what the board should do with these.
Now, the restrictions in this kind of, rezoning would be a valid restriction and enforceable, not like the one that we looked at before?
This is still not a conditional use. This is a developer offering in good faith what he considers, what he tells you he will put in his restrictive covenants. He is willing to put it on the site plan.
Okay.
That the board would approve, and that would require him to bring that back if the board wanted to see it first. But this was not a conditional use. We don't want to get into contract zoning or anything like that, so.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the main thing. A lot of the, opposition and, you know, I totally understand it. I totally empathize with not wanting a large development nearby, but I think that a lot of the opposition, what I've heard repeated, we don't want commercial, we don't want commercial, we don't want these certain things, you know, we want the ponds to stay. And the reality of the situation is I want those things too. And so what I tried to do, was read it, into the public record at planning board, coordinate with Scott and say, hey, how do we go about actually adding this? Because it was explained to me that, a site plan modification, in my opinion, in land use and rezoning, that adding them as conditions, well, condition runs with the land, and it makes them much more strict, you know. And so then I went to Scott and I said, well, how do I get, you know, residents who have concerns, and a lot of them are very valid, how do I get them to say, okay, we're authenticating that this is what we're gonna do because the ordinance is not, you know, conditional use, which is what we wanted to do. So, I'd probably let the town attorney speak to that after we, you know, kind of go through them. But these are all things that we've intended to do after the planning board meeting, that we've read into the record. These are all things that I want to get on the public record today that we intend to do. And I am open. I'm not here, really even suggesting anything such as contract zoning, as much as I'm saying from a policy enforcement standpoint, please help me, you know, add these in a strict manner. And I know that can potentially be done with deed restriction. I feel like it could potentially be done with site plan modifications tied to CCR approvals. But whatever vehicle that needs to happen, I'm more than willing. So that being said, I'm just going to walk through, and there's about 9 of them, and get you how we came to these conclusions. We had a few residents reach out to us individually. I know there was a lot of opposition. I don't know who got contacted or who didn't get contacted, but what I can tell you is we kept a catalog of everyone that contacted us, notes of when we called them, if we left them a voicemail, if they called us back. And people on here, such as David Rush, you know, the first time I heard from him was last night. You know, and you know, we worked for it and said, okay, how do we get this, you know, to appease him? We think it's the right thing to do, but a lot of these concerns we didn't hear, you know, till later on in the game. So the first one being, that no commercial use other than those associated with residential development shall be approved on this property. Again, we're willing to add that as a deed restriction, add it to the CCRs, associated with the project, whatever vehicle, and I'll let the town attorney speak to that, we need to do to assure that, I'm more than willing. I've gotten a lot of feedback about, will you keep the ponds within the HOA? What categorizes a major or minor site plan modification? And I think obviously reducing ponds would trigger a major site plan modification, but in an attempt to fully get everyone on the same page, add that as a condition. I had concern. There was a lot of concern about the price point, which typically I don't like to get into. I think that, and I've stated on the record that I think this community will average over time in the $300,000 to $325,000 price point. I don't like getting into valuations. Typically, it's always been advised to me that is not a land use issue, but then I'm free to offer it. So that being said, I heard some rhetoric about, well, how do we know that you're not going to turn it into a rental community? How do we know that this is not gonna get bought up at the recession? How do we know that Wade Journey or someone, someone like that is not gonna come in here? So another condition that we excited to add, because it's something that we were gonna, probably do anyway, is that these homes, cannot rent out, and I think the best way to phrase it is for more than 12 months, unless it's related to financial hardship or moving. The intent of that is not someone loses their job, and they have to move back in with someone and rent out to cover their mortgage, or, someone's, parent gets sick and they're letting them live in their active adult unit, for a little bit. The intent with this is to strictly discourage and enforceably so that some, third-party organization, people aren't going out there and buying units strictly to rent them, because we heard some comments about how it affects land values. So happy to add that to the CCRs as well. You can tell that I wrote these and not an attorney when in point 4 it says the lot's on the smaller track as opposed to having like an actual definition. But we heard some concern about bringing driveways in off of Heggie Road. Betty Moon reached out to me after the initial planning board meeting, and she came to me and she said, hey, I live right here. This lot is going to be right next door to me. Can I buy it from you? Is there anything you can do? Can you provide a buffer? We sat down, we talked about it. Losing a couple lots on this site plan, I'm not up here, I feel like, trying to be as greedy as possible and max this thing out. Losing a couple lots, losing some acreage to be good neighbors, no problem whatsoever. So what we came up with is, hey, Betty, if staff will allow it, we'll deed it over to you. It's not an issue whatsoever. I think it would create goodwill. So without a doubt, what I added here was, the lots adjoining Betty Moon's property shall be gifted to her as allowed by the staff so that they can keep a buffer. Also had concern about people not wanting driveways off of Heggie Road. And again, I think that's a very valid concern. That's what I was hoping to accomplish by this feedback is, look, I'm happy to work with valid concerns. I'm happy to work with people any way that I can. But we're gonna add another condition that you can't bring driveways off of Heggie Road.
Can I say one word about that?
Yes.
Over here.
Yeah.
DOT will review that during the course of his driveway application. He'll have to apply. And more than likely, when they see that, they will probably require a negative easement to actually be placed on the recorded plat to keep those driveways from being allowed to come on to Heggie Road. So I've seen that on numerous occasions when you have double frontage lots. The front of the homes will be facing the internal roads of the subdivision. And so DOT will.
Guy, what are you referring to these right here? Or are you referring to
the new lots that you're wanting to?
Right here.
All right, so Guy, what you're saying is the current houses that are sitting on the white parcels there face Heggie Road.
Yeah, I'm talking about.
You're talking about right here.
These along here that front the internal roads, but also the back side of the lots.
Oh, okay. Well, for clarification, I think generally we're on the same page about that these, but where I was going right here is these particular lots that the only viable driveway access is off Heggie Road, resulting in the loss of those lots. Yeah. We're not going to bring those off Heggie Road anymore.
Okay.
And I wrote it in a way, again, I'm not an attorney, didn't spend a whole lot of time at school, but wrote it in a way that either adjoining adjacent property owners' land as a buffer or an extension of the lots that, an extension of the back of the lots off of, I guess that's Road G, that's what we came up with. That would be, those would be the available options.
Sure.
So, that being said, no traffic directly off Heggie Road, or not traffic, but no driveway access off Heggie Road unless it's through the subdivision. So that was the intent of that, which again, I mean, it obviously results in a net loss of a few lots, but we're happy to do it. We had point number 5, which was provide a buffer and landscape vegetation along the frontage of the property that fronts Deborah Foltz's and Jim and Robin Human's property. This frontage right here is currently being utilized, I believe, as an access easement that when we ran a boundary survey is actually on our portion of the property. Ms. Foltz came up to me after the planning board meeting in just the most gracious way possible, just is there anything you can do? Can you look into it? And again, we said, hey, if planning board will allow us, you know, we're happy to deed that access over to you. It doesn't need to stay on our property. If they won't allow us to do that, then we can put it in common element, and create an access easement. About 2 or 3 days ago, or no, it was after the second planning board meeting, so probably about 4 or 5 days ago, or a week ago, Robin and Jim Human, came up to me, and asked, hey, you know, we live right on top of Deborah. Are there certain things that you could help us with? And again, that stands true for them too, deeding that access, creating a landscape buffer. If staff allows it, then we'd like to do that as well. The other condition that I genuinely don't know if it's enforceable, and I wanted to get up there, and I don't know if, you know, this is y'all's party, it's not mine, so I don't know if it's better to go through this and then towards the end, kind of go through some of the clarifiers or however y'all want to handle it. But they asked that this access easement is currently, at times, can function as a cut-through road, and would we be willing to close it? And I said, thinking about it, well, if we deed it to y'all, I don't know, it's really our decision, but secondly, I think that's more of a question for fire. I don't know if that gets into creating an illegal plat based off of access, but you know, we're happy to do it. I just don't know if staff would allow it, then by all means, we would notate that on the plat as well.
Mr. Attorney, I think that would take a separate action to close that through a closure procedure.
Is that a dedicated roadway? May I interject? No, sir, it's not a dedicated road. There could be no road closed because there's no road. There's a driveway there, the details of which I do not know all of. Some of these folks may have valid easements to use that driveway. The driveway does lie all or in part upon the property of the petitioner. However, doesn't matter whether there's an easement, whether there isn't an easement. Mr. Lyons is saying, and yes, he can deed that property to these people. They won't have an easement anymore, they'll own a driveway. And that is what he's intending to represent tonight. That there, you know, I'll consider this your driveway, I'll even give you title to the land under it. I want nothing to do with it, I'm not gonna block it, I'm not gonna bother it. It's up to them whether they wanna prevent anybody from driving back and forward and cutting through after that. He's out of the picture, he gave it to them. So we're saying whatever portion of that driveway is on this tract, we'll take it off this tract. We'll deed it away.
That's right. I appreciate that, Brad.
Okay. Can we stop for 1 second? I want to go back to the parcels that you're talking about here off of Hagee Road. So when you turn off of Hartman, I don't know where we went there.
Sorry about that.
So right there. If you turn off of Hartman, yep, those parcels right there.
Mm-hmm.
There's currently houses in the white spaces that are facing Hagee Road. So you're saying to put an easement through your development to go to those homes, is that what you're saying?
No, and I appreciate you asking the question. What I'm saying is there was concern about adding additional driveways off Hagee Road.
Mm-hmm.
So we're saying we're gonna get rid of these lots altogether.
Okay, so you're gonna do away with them. And I understand that one lot that you're gonna deed to
Miss Moon.
Miss Moon, okay. What are you gonna do with the other 4 lots?
That one, we were planning on deeding to Miss Moon as well. She also has a son out there that I don't know where he lives. Long story short, they're most likely gonna get deeded that way, and
right.
If they don't, they'd be...
And they could build a house just like the other folks and not be part of the HOA, but what about the 3 lots between the other 2?
Again, we're not gonna have any driveways off Hagee Road.
Okay, so you're not gonna build anything there?
No, we put, and I think we put that with staff's recommendation or approval, whether that has to be deeding them off, adding them as common element, a landscape buffer, or adding them to the back of the existing lots, whatever vehicle gets rid of any possibility of having additional driveways off Hagee Road.
Okay, so would you be okay if we just removed those 5 lots, that tract of land right there, out of the MXR designation?
Honestly, that would probably be a smooth way to do it. I mean, I think that would probably be the smoothest way to do it. So, yeah.
Leave it to the attorney.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
That's a great idea.
Okay. The county attorney?
I sort of have a whole lot of motions towards the end of this thing. Maybe they end up in the right spot at the end, I don't know.
Right. Okay.
so that was a concern. I think that's a great idea. Point number 7, or condition number 7 was, again, Robin and Jen Human said, hey, they had questions about their water table. We're on public water, so it's not gonna affect it. I'll touch that in a little bit, but, they said, well, would you allow us to tap up to your water system? And so I said, hey, us providing utility easement, no problem at all. If Davidson Water will allow it, then we're happy to provide, a utility easement. So from a site plan modification standpoint, we can provide utility easement, add that as a condition, no problems asked. What I don't know is how Davidson Water would affect that, how it would affect their side of it. So all that being said, we also had the Foltuskis who live right here. And in all honesty, I feel for them the most because they just moved out there. They have 6 acres. I'm sure he spent time on that land. I understand so much more opposition in their circumstance than I do, people way over here or over, it might be further that way. But to me, that makes a lot of sense. But they have been super gracious. I don't think that they're in full support of the neighborhood. I probably wouldn't be, but in any event, I just think they've been tremendous to work with. But we're gonna do the same thing in terms of providing a landscape buffer there. And then last night, David Rush called me. He has 10 acres right here. He said he was gonna put a fence up. He's got a pond there and was concerned about liability, children going over there and whatnot. He said, I'd like to have something concrete before you get up there, could affect, how I view this thing. So, again, I hate doing this really in kind of a convoluted way, but I guess that's, y'all help us clean it up. But again, provide buffer and or deed land to incorporate CCRs at no walking trail or portion of the land that adjoins David Rush's property. We'll have residents walking back there. He asked for a landscape buffer, or some sort of, deeded additional buffer. I think our preference would be just to deed him, a little bit more strip of land because it's not gonna affect our lot depth too much over there. So we're happy to do that. Sorry that we led with all that, and I'm sure we'll find a way to clean it up. But that is where we stand, and I wanna say that wholeheartedly, I'm not perfect by any means. There probably are some people out here that I missed, but I felt like I did my best for the individuals that came to me or any one of my team individually, try to say, how can we work with y'all? And I think that those that are most affected by the property being adjacent, I know Deborah and Betty are sitting right here, and I know they didn't want to get up here and speak, but to me, the people that are most affected by it, that went from being definitely against it to obviously being, more for it, I feel good about that regardless of the outcome. The next slide I want to provide is, we'll get there eventually. We're gonna get to see all sorts of my stuff. I'll just go ahead and read it because I guess I might have left it off. But the comparison between this neighborhood and the RA3 neighborhood, and I think it's important to note that through use by right, vested right in a lot of cases, special permit, which kicks us into the quasi-judicial realm, which I feel like, if you have a good case, is much stronger that a quasi-judicial hearing would get approved. And then by development standard, which I think a lot of that gets handled at the staff level. But by those 3 vehicles, there's a list of things that is already available to be approved within the RA3 zoning. And it includes everything from, I had to ask someone what animal grooming was and animal husbandry. I'm still not entirely sure. We have biodiesel fuel production, cemeteries, a dumpster site. We have storage of low-end explosives, outdoor firing range, commercial kennels, in some cases retail above 10,000 square feet, landfills greater than 10 acres. So I say all that, and I asked Scott to make sure that my thinking's aligned, but obviously, because it has been contentious, and to clarify that, am I correct in thinking that with those uses pulled from the permitted use table, if it was a vested right, that does not come to county commissioners for rezoning? If you go for it, it would just be handled at the planning board for a staff level. If it is a special use permit, it's obviously quasi-judicial, but could you talk to us the difference between going forward with that versus going forward with a rezoning change altogether?
Talking about on the subdivision or those uses you just read?
Well, I feel like what I'm trying to, convey is that I think that some of the opposition, and for myself, that, if you rally and you defeat a plan, the idea is maybe you can rally and defeat the second plan and the third plan until someone gives up, but that going with a use by right is just a totally different process than what we've gone through.
It is. The uses that you read off are uses that could go in there by right or by special use permit. I think what Mr. Lyons is trying to refer here in the public tonight is that if this rezoning is denied tonight, he can go back and, as you know, go through the normal traditional subdivision process through our planning board, which is more of a technical approval. If he meets A, B, C, and D, they pretty much have to approve it. Mr. Krotz made mention of the sewer allocation that would have to come before this board just for the sewer allocation. But if that were approved, then the planning board could approve the use by right that you see on the screen right now, typically a road system that he believes he would have to use to get the 20,000 square foot lot densities that he is asking for. Is that kind of what you're wanting to say?
And I was aware, but going for the sewer allocation, does that fall into special permit at that point, or how do y'all handle that?
No, it's just a request, just a basic request that you come before the board asking for anything over 10,000 gallons has to come before this board for approval.
Okay, I appreciate that. So I guess in terms of the no commercial movement, which I myself, I feel like I'm a part of, the idea being that, if y'all, kind of think I'm full of crap and you don't like the plan or whatnot, that we could go forward, say on this side of it, as a RA3 standard subdivision, but then all those uses that I listed would stand still, that could be done on that side of it at any point. And so where I'm going with that is that I genuinely believe, and I have a tough time seeing how you can interpret it any other way, that if a major concern is no commercial at any point, then adopting this plan with us being willing to deed restrict it, include it in the CCRs, notate it on the site plan, whatever vehicle y'all would like to move forward with, fully eliminates the prospect of any commercial in the future where a denial of this plan doesn't by any standards. And I'd say furthermore, even the idea that you'd have to go back for a special sewer allocation, I mean, I think you could easily put a gun range out here, and have it on a septic lot. And avoid that process, avoid that step altogether. Sure.
Yeah, everything you listed, if I'm not mistaken, would have to come back before the board. I don't know, animal husbandry, well, I don't know what that is, but I think most wives probably already do that now, so.
Okay. Gotcha. So that being said, there are a few things that, in terms of when we compare Plan A to Plan B that I feel like, are very straightforward. Plan B, we're looking at a 5 to 10% reduction in lot yield, and I'm happy to walk through the actual numbers behind that if anyone wants a more thorough explanation. Yeah, I totally get it, me neither. But the reduction of all common open space, loss of the ponds entirely, reduction in development standards. So I would say that those are factual losses, but I would say on the subjective side, which Brad touched on, would be how this affects traffic, how this affects the schools, and how this affects utility maintenance within the county. And so when I look at the schools, kind of what Brad alluded to is Scott, y'all did a study on Freeburg Village, or you did a study on schools, and you found that really in an active adult type community that there's just not many students utilizing schools.
Yeah, what we did is we checked with Freeburg Village, and out of the 180 units that they have developed on their property, only 5 families, or total of 5 kids, 5 kids out of the development actually attend school in Davidson County.
Are those 2-story, 4-bedroom units?
Not all of them. Some of them are 2 and 3 bedrooms.
Well, I lived in Freeburg, so I know, but you have some that are a couple units that are 4 bedrooms. Most are 3 and 2. They are. Oh, well, you've got one road that's got one floor, and then you've got another two or three roads that's 2-story. They started out with the quads, and now they have revamped the quads into one floor instead of two, because of the price point. They were having a hard time selling them for the value that you got. So they've changed it and revamped it. And that was something that didn't have to come back before, I guess, the planning and zoning to revamp that
correct.
site plan, because it didn't really alter it. But it did lower that price point down for Friedberg. But I know there's not a lot of kids that live there. I'd say 5 or so. That's about right. There's not many. Most of it's grandkids that come and visit, and that's it.
And I mean, I don't wanna say it is fact, because I think it's, you know, the nature of it's speculative, but when we're saying 30 to, you know, probably about 30% of our plan is targeted active adults, if the functional density, is not much different between both plans, and you have a third that probably is not gonna have children, a third that is probably not gonna have, 4 to 5 people to a house, where a separate plan might have a lot more of those features, then, we feel like the impact on school is actually gonna be less with our current plan, and we actually feel like the traffic impact is gonna be less with our current plan, because the average amount of people per household's less, and our average driver age is gonna be substantially less too, because there's gonna be less high school students driving in and off of Hagee Road within our subdivision. So I guess to conclude, and I'm happy to answer any questions, I feel like addressing all the concerns of the neighbors, we wanted to go above and beyond and do that. I think that, we reached out to set up a neighborhood meeting prior to the first planning board session, and that was declined. And I understand that there's a lot of frustration, there's a lot of animosity. I think that a lot of it is justified. I put myself in that situation. That anger has to go somewhere, that frustration has to go somewhere. I totally understand that. We reached out after the second planning board meeting, again for another meeting, with no avail. What I do have is I have the individuals that I spoke with directly that either came to me, that came to the planning board meetings, that came up to me, and we've worked very hard to address their concerns. I'd be lying if I said that I think that there are a large majority of people that are opposed to this, that are not directly affected in near the way the adjoining landowners are, and I think that is, that's a little bit upsetting, but, I do think, and we read the policies out, I mean, it's about 15 of them, 6.1 all the way through 12.4, staff recommendation and planning board vote. I think most people would concur that this does totally fit the land use plan. That's not my decision to make, and so, I understand that y'all have to be, fair and firm, and I appreciate you listening to us, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
What school district is that in?
That is in Oak Grove.
It is in Oak Grove?
Mhm.
Is there anybody here from the high schools? Mr. Johnson, is that correct? Yes. Could you step up here just a minute? Do you have the numbers? That's what your present capacity is now?
Yes, sir. We, this would be the Oak Grove, high school feeder pattern. And the elementary school is, Freeburg, and they're currently at 93% capacity. We have Oak Grove Middle School, which is at 70% capacity. And then we have the high school, which will get another grade level next year. And at that point, we'll be at 75% capacity.
With the add-on
Yes, sir.
ability there? Okay. Have you done any studies as to if everything were status quo, as far as growth without this
We would
inclusion,
be-
what the projected growth would be?
In the Oak Grove, it would be, what I would call, flat. It would maintain or be consistent, with the kids that are feeding through the elementary, to the middle and to the high school.
What about elementary though? Would that stay consistent, or would you max out?
We are, like I said, we're at 93%. That would depending on, the enrollment through kindergarten. So I don't have those projections.
Well, we just had a lot of power outages, so.
Right.
They're coming.
Yeah.
So sorry, bad joke. Okay.
Anybody have any other questions for Mr. Johnson? Mr. Johnson, thank you so much for
Well,
coming in.
When you talk about 75% capacity, what does that,
Well, Oak Grove High School was built for 1,300.
okay,
And so we currently have 727
Okay,
kids,
okay.
in that building. And then next year, we're projected 978.
Thank you. That's what it's for.
All right, you're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
You're welcome.
I was gonna conclude behind Mr. Lyons, with just a couple of things. If I'll take a couple of more minutes, none of us wanna be here all night. There were a few more slides. Staff had asked for some examples of typical homes, and this is not, we're not going into contract telling them we're gonna build this house. But we did reach out, he did reach out, I on his behalf reached out to some of the regional and national builders whom he has potentially, there are no signed contracts, there are no signed letters of intent, but these were provided by some of those builders as typical of the type of housing that he intends to build in the subdivision. Wanted to make sure you got to see those tonight. Another comment that I didn't want to omit is Mr. Lyons projects 10-year build-out. This subdivision will be done in phases. You will not get 400 and some homes in 2019. It's a 10-year build-out. So 10-year build-out, you know, if everything goes well, 40 homes a year. Again, to go back to my opening statements, that's 10% of what I'm already doing in Davidson County this year. We're gonna have to deal with impacts to schools, we're gonna have to deal with impacts to infrastructure, irregardless of this rezoning tonight.
What's your square footage?
Square
I haven't
footage
heard
is
that mentioned.
1,800 to 2,100, somewhere in that general.
So what's the minimum?
Yeah, so, in terms of the minimum square footage, we haven't set one in the CCRs. What I can tell you is the way we're gonna look at it is say, okay, what is the average price per square foot selling that school district? And just pick a number. Say it's, and I don't know if it's 130 or 150 bucks a foot. I don't have the market data, you know, ahead of us. But what we feel like is the average price per square foot in that school district. The square footage of the house is probably, on the active adult side, probably gonna be somewhere between 1,800 and 2,600. The kind of the value single-family home is probably gonna be somewhere between 2,500 and 4,000, but it's all gonna be in line with what the typical square footages are in that area.
So would you put a minimum in your requirements that you were handing out? Would you put a minimum square footage?
Yeah,
Could you put a restriction?
Yeah, I think that, I'm happy to add a restriction, and I think the reality situation is, by doing it in the MXR zoning with fee simple ownership and the restrictive covenants, that's gonna be implemented anyway. So I'm happy to do that. In terms of the exact language, I don't know what that would look like, but that active adult type buyer, I mean, I think you're probably looking somewhere around that 1,800 square foot minimum. And I'd be happy to verify that and add that in the CCRs, no problem.
And you're gonna have no single level homes in this whatsoever?
What, in terms of just one story?
One story,
No,
one level?
Yeah, no, I think that there's a definitely, part of the, buyer profile out there that would prefer a ranch. You know, typically, the active adult buyer in particular, a lot of it likes one level living, and what you see typically on the second story, and, you know, in my experience, it's not a bunch of bedrooms, but one large bonus room. So I think that portion, of the project would probably be a lot more one level living with bonus rooms finished upstairs. And then one other thing I would like to clarify, if you don't mind, and Brad brought it to my attention. I'm fully aware that on those uses, in the chart under RA3, a lot of those, some fall under vested right, but a lot of those fall under, special permit. I guess the point I was trying to make, and I did an awful job explaining it, is that I feel typically when you go the quasi judicial route, it's typically less opinion based and more fact based, and that I feel like going forward with those in some ways is beneficial with a special use permit, but that's neither here nor there.
And the point, the end point of all that discussion is simply to summarize this. We present to you tonight a site plan that we think provides you with a much better use of this property overall and a holistic approach than many of the other allowable uses by right or potential other rezonings. To summarize it all.
That's a better way to say it.
That's what we're trying to do.
That's why you pay him.
Gentlemen, we thank you for the opportunity.
Got one question for you. What type buffer or berm are you gonna have facing Heggie Road with the rear of the houses, all the houses, the rear of the houses mainly are facing the different roads. Are you gonna have a berm, have a buffer above that?
Yes,
Have you
so-
got that far?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. So I could be wrong, but my understanding is that there is not a specific type planting yard.
For residential.
Yeah, for that road in particular. And the reason I ask is that the plan that I have to go off of is one that we've used at the farm at Lake Brant. That is, it's probably, in terms of dollars, you're probably looking at about $5,000 for every 100 feet. It's that type of quality, and I have pictures of that and I have renderings of it. But I think in particular this neighborhood and what you've seen with Friedberg, that if you don't do those things to make it extremely nice on the front end, you run the risk of it looking like it's just sitting in an open field. And so we're going to go 100% overkill on the landscaping, and I'm happy to provide a concrete plan for y'all to review as well.
So what you've got there, is it a berm with landscaping or?
It's a berm. Oh, go ahead.
From a practical standpoint, when we do these types of subdivisions, we generate topsoil when we build the roads.
Right.
And when we have sewer, so we're not covering area needed for septic systems in the backyards, we typically find it works extremely well to take that topsoil from the roadways and create berms along right behind the right-of-way on Hagee Road for all those lots that join Hagee Road, in which then he's talking about the types of planting which he would install. So that's a very typical progression during the construction of this type of subdivision.
Yeah, and I would say typically what we're looking at is you normally generate enough topsoil to have about a 6-foot berm and then have tree plantings on top of it, so we feel like it's substantial.
Yeah, the other thing I noticed is there's no curb and gutter.
Correct. I don't like curb and gutter. Guy Corman doesn't like curb and gutter either.
It causes,
curb and gutter concentrates stormwater and exacerbates erosion problems. Ribbon pavement roads with typical ditch sections, such as all these folks and myself live off of, are more environmentally friendly. They absorb more stormwater as it happens. The event we just had is worsened, it's exacerbated by curb and gutter. Many people like it, many municipalities require it, but it creates concentrated, more rapid runoff, and it's a double-edged sword. When these municipalities require curb and gutter, then they also wind up having to require stormwater best management practices to accumulate it. So you accumulate it, concentrate it, then take it over here and have to catch it and treat it and let it back. It's a double-edged sword. I don't like it. I prefer ditch road sections.
All right.
A lot of people prefer the look of them too.
The other thing is, when you did your road study with, who was it that you said, David?
Davenport.
Davenport. What was the date that they completed that?
About 2 weeks ago.
And they actually went out and
yes,
done
they
a
did
site
a
study?
13-hour on-site traffic count,
But
I believe on a Tuesday.
Right. Was it a Tuesday?
They've got the date in the report. October the 10th, whatever that was.
Someone said Wednesday.
Was that, I think that was a day that schools were not in session, right?
I don't know.
I think that was. Do you know, Mr. Johnson?
What was that date again?
October 10th is on a Wednesday. I think that was a day that we didn't have schools in session.
I don't know.
I don't know if that would've, was it Thursday, Friday? Okay, all right, never mind.
Okay, so it
I wanted to make sure we still had all the right traffic.
Their letter told me it was a typical day, and I didn't look at what you were just bringing up, but apparently it was a typical day.
Okay.
Got a couple of questions. What, you said 10-year build out, is this gonna be built in 2 phases, 4 phases?
I anticipate 4. Mr. Lyons may, if he's got people showing up wanting to buy lots faster, but I, as a surveyor that works with my civil engineers, see 4 phases. If I'm tasked with construction documents, I see 4 pieces.
So if you was to do this in 4 phases, which phase would you do first? Can you show me on the map?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to clarify, when we talk about a 10-year build-out, I think that, depending on the product, depending on what end buyers end up liking more, There is a possibility it's expedited from that. There's also a possibility it's slowed down, but, you know, I think in the best case scenario, you're looking at, you know, 6 to 8, with 10 certainly being reasonable. But just by the nature of where gravity, sewer, or where sewer's coming from, where we're gonna gravity to back down here, this is most likely gonna be our first phase right in here.
It's been a while since, I've been involved in any of this. When does the state take over these roads? Are y'all gonna petition the state to take
These are
over?
gonna be state-maintained roads. State maintenance occurs when you do something called a petition to addition. A petition to addition is instigated by the developer, and it is not a percentage of homes, it's based on homes per linear length. And the number evades me, Mr. Yates, but I believe it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 or 5 homes per 0.2 of a mile. It won't be difficult in this subdivision to reach the criteria to begin the process for petition to addition, which obviously is in his best interest to do as early on as possible, so he's no longer responsible for maintenance.
His restricted covenants go into a lot of detail, and I was very pleased to see the language of how he's gonna hold the, contractors and each property owner, responsible for making sure that their driveway connections meet DOT criteria with the piping underneath the driveway. A lot of times we see that as a problem in getting the roads, taken over by the state because of the wrong size pipe. But he puts it on the homeowner and his contractor, to make sure that, it's done to meet DOT criteria, so it won't be a problem to add that road.
So will they take these roads while construction is still underway?
Yes, qualified, yes. They will take these roads when they meet the occupied dwelling density requirements I spoke of, which I won't read into the record because I'm not positive of them, so long as the road and the shoulders and the driveway are in a condition that is acceptable to DOT. So you can get them to take over subdivisions where construction is still occurring, but no, they won't take it over where the people doing the construction have an excessive amount of disturbance to the shoulders and the ditch lines and things. You're going to have stable shoulders with grass growing that meet the slopes. Driveways have to be installed properly. If construction's going on properly, they'll take them. If you've got some improper construction, they're going to request and require that be corrected prior to taking them over.
Like I say, one of the issues I see here, if you start off at phase 1, build your roads to this upper end, you hadn't even started building the houses in the back yet, so they gotta come right over those roads that you're trying to get DOT to take, so.
Yeah, that is something I really like about this site plan. Say that this loop is, I don't like your pointer, Scott.
And the only reason I'm getting into all this, I don't want the homeowners at the end, people that's already bought, DOT.
So I'll go back to that. You know, if I see this as a phase 1A, then I see this as a phase 1B or a phase 2. So if we bring the sewer up, and he's right, logistically, you do this, you do get to this first, because that's where the sewer hits first. So say you did this section first, and construction occurs there. Well, you might leave this off for a while, even though it might look like part of phase 1, and you might go ahead and build this road and this connection, and let this be phase 2. Then you might follow either here or there with a phase 3 or 3A, 3B, and then a 4 that finally reaches around the backside and puts in this connection. But I think this allows for lots of interconnectivity and directing construction traffic to the new sections away from the existing sections. I like the road layout on this.
Yeah, I think that's right. And two, and I know there's some realtors here, but not having roads turned over to DOT, I mean, is a huge, huge issue. And what we found is average, the life of road before it really starts to fail in certain spots, about 10 years. And really every county in the Triad is really just littered with roads that weren't turned over to DOT. I mean, we're seeing it everywhere. So definitely a point of emphasis on our end. And I think luckily the Real Estate Commission is catching on to it. And I know they've had a lot of updated training in terms of making sure the CCRs are set up properly, but it's a very, very valid concern.
Do you know if you're gonna build these to minimum DOT standards, or are you gonna build them a little better than that?
Well, some of these shorter streets might allow for 18-foot pavement per their standards, but we're gonna have minimum 20-foot widths. And I don't want him to kick me when we leave tonight, but I also think we're gonna wind up, for instance, this is still a laser pointer, isn't it? For instance, this road, it might be well in our best interest to have thicker paving on that road than conventional requirement, because you're gonna have a higher burden of traffic through the duration of the subdivision. That's something we did. You guys familiar with Rockland? Over off Fry Bridge Road, I did Rockland. The main road, Dorchester, going in from Fry Bridge back to the intersection, we've got extra gravel and extra pavement, because that road carries more traffic than any of the rest of the roads. So these are things that we look at from a design standpoint. It's better to spend an extra little bit of money, well, it's not a little bit of money, but sometimes spending more money going in, as you're alluding to, prevents problems down the road and winds up being a better economic decision. And these are the types of things we recognize.
This is a question for Guy. Guy, is there anything we can do as a county? I know some of the cities require more than a minimum DOT standard for their roads, because that is a problem. Minimum DOT standards is weak. So is that something we can do?
Again, it's not a conditional use, but it's something that he could agree to add into his restrictive covenants or his agreements.
You'll let me comment to it also. You can encourage, as commissioners, to encourage him to interact with his DOT representative, because many times this type of thing which you're speaking to can be and is required by NCDOT when they look at the big picture, because they realize they're going to eventually have to keep them up. So simply telling him that you want him to make sure that DOT looks at these types of situations is going to be...
I mean, we can talk to the DOT, but I'm not so sure we can't put it in our ordinance that they got to build them heavier than minimum DOT.
Well, I mean, you could amend...
Because I see some of the municipalities already do that, and it's required that... And I'm not trying to make it harder on the developer. I'm just seeing these roads going all to pieces while they're still under construction, and these homeowners got to live in them for 3 or 4 years, or 2 or 3 years before. And then it takes the state a year to take them over, or 2 now anyhow, because they got an influx of...
It's very bad. And the reality of the situation is, I mean, we're always, especially this time of year, we're trying to beat the cold, you know, and to get a proof roll off. I know a lot of times we're compacting extra stone anyway, so we've definitely been in the habit of building to stricter standards here recently, especially this time of year. But the one other thing I'd like to add is I had someone ask about a potential traffic circle in the neighborhood, and I wanted to put one either right here at the entrance, and it was my understanding that DOT would not be in favor of that. So I know a resident did reach out to me, but I personally thought it was going to look very nice for what that's, you know, worth.
Okay, I'm sorry, guys. I had to get a few questions out of the way.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions right now for these gentlemen?
Good.
Okay. Thank you,
gentlemen.
All right. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak either in favor of or in opposition to this request? Please come forward. Barney W. Hill.
It's me. What that is. You wanna take that? Okay, I'll do that.
Hey, Barney, that's for the news media back in the back. That's a mic for them, buddy.
I didn't wanna break it.
It's just the media. It's okay. You can.
Well, we've been through Ruffalo Rescue this year and Dan Batchelor, and I came here tonight, ready for a fight, but everybody seems to be hunky-dory with each other, so just a couple clarifications here. Somebody at the first, planning board meeting claimed that she was reading the definition of, MXR evidently off of her phone, and she said that MXR development should be, quote, located near major thoroughfares and highways with access to public transportation close by. Well, that's leaving a lot out and putting some in. So, just for the record, let me read the exact definition, which I've proofread several times. The use of this district shall be limited to areas along major thoroughfares, minor thoroughfares, or collector streets having adequate access. Development seeking MXR zoning shall be encouraged to locate in areas with adequate public facilities, including public water and sewer service, schools, and transportation facilities. She left out all of them but the transportation. And there was some mention of the policies that were cited in the staff recommendation. There were 14 of them. I don't know that I've ever heard more than about 5 or 6 policy statements that supported one request. This one has 14. And if there are any opponents left, I'd like to see them dispute the validity of any of those policy statements. The applicant could have had about the same number under that standard subdivision, the traditional subdivision method. I don't know why he's subjecting himself to the grief of this process, but for whatever reason he chose to do it the hard way, and I think he's done it. He's checked off all the boxes. And what I always end with, I'm for what he's for, because it's his property, or going to be.
Thank you, Barney. How many people, let me ask this real quick, how many here is going to want to speak on this matter? Okay, we're going to take about a 5-minute recess before we start to let you, anyone who has to go.
Guy's already moved up there to speak.
He's anxious.
You're right. We'll burn one or we got two.
Oh, yeah.
We're getting old,
I tell you what, I have seen the longest I've been on this. This is one of the best
Done it, done. He did a great job.
I'm doing pretty good, buddy. Get up.
your name? State your name, sir.
My name is James Human. I am, that little stretch of wonderful right there. If I was king of the world, I would say, let's turn this land over to the, Land Conservancy, and, hopefully when I win the lottery, I can buy it before it gets developed. But, if I had to say which way would I want it to be zoned, I would say the, MXR. As long as those, things that we as landowners around have asked Buddy to look at. MXR is better than the RA3 because, if we have a standard neighborhood there, then any Billy Bob can move in and, park his truck out in his front yard with, up on jack stands. So I would prefer the MX. Okay, anyway, we have met with Buddy, and he has met, all of our requests. Talking with the community, one of the big things was no commercial development, and I believe you discussed that, and, I know there's a big concern about traffic, and, one of my recommendations would be to, drop the, speed limit down. I think it's 45 now, I'm not sure, but it needs to be like 25. I don't know, but, there is great concern about this corner. Right. Come on, right there. If the pointer works. But anyway, I support the MXR. Buddy has agreed that the no commercial, save the ponds. He has worked quite closely with us, and I think, other than turning it over to the Land Conservancy, a development like proposed would be the lesser of two evils. In order to save time, I won't talk anymore. Thank you for your time, and hopefully we can all come together as a community and work through this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, yes, the driveway, proposed closing this, and this thing, pointer ain't gonna work. Anyway, quick. It runs from Peggy Road all the way up to Mount Olivet. I'm right in the middle. Deborah Foltz lives right here, she's a widow. We would like to propose that, if we close this spot right here with a gate, just so it does not become a cut through to Mount Olivet to bypass, Union Grove or the Union Grove, Mount Olivet Church Road intersection. Because instead of going down here, they just go that way. We really don't want that.
Wasn't a reference made that was gonna be deeded over to those property owners? Or the easement, given an easement? Okay. Okay. Anybody else want to speak? Come forward if you do.
Next.
Okay, sir.
My name is James Fortson. I'm a resident of Transu Drive, the Reich Farm Development. Excuse me if I say something inappropriate tonight. It's the first time I've had to talk to you gentlemen. I've sat here tonight and listened a lot to all the professional experts, and I'm afraid I still have to disagree. Reich Farm is a wonderful community with sitting on 1 acre lots. lots of green space, we've got a pond, and children with plenty of room to run and play. There's been talk about this new development being a, active senior. I spent a lot of time in the past 6 months working with active senior developments, looking for one for my parents and possibly for myself. Active seniors are not looking for 2,100 square foot, 2-story houses. They're looking for 1,400 square foot houses. They're trying to downsize. I have trouble believing that they're gonna get 30% active adults with no children in this development. But my most serious concern is the traffic on Hagee Road. That road has 3 very sharp turns in it with a very deep hill in between 2 of those turns. The speed limit is already 15 miles an hour. And we're gonna add 900 plus cars a day on that road. Active adults, they give up cars. My parents are 85, they haven't given up the second car yet. And my mother would tell you what she thinks about giving up her car. We're gonna add 900 plus cars on that road. There needs to be a professional NCDOT study before we move forward on this. I think we could zone as Wright Farm and have the same quality of living up and down that street. Thank you, gentlemen.
Guy, what is, Wright Farms, zoning?
RS.
Okay.
Got a question for Guy regarding DOT. In order to have DOT to do a study based on a road of a proposed subdivision, will they do that?
It's not generally in their purview to do that kind of thing. That is usually left up to the private consulting firms because it's gonna benefit the consultant, and so he has to pay for it. It would have to be some kind of a monumental impact that it would in fact impact the entire county as a whole somewhat to have DOT do some kind of a study. But they rely upon consultants to provide them. Mr. Davenport's firm has been around for about 15 years now. Mr. Davenport was actually the traffic operations engineer for Division 9. So before he started his own company, left DOT employment and started his own company. And so the people that are doing his work are qualified engineers, civil engineers that have their professional certifications and work with the DOT on a everyday basis.
And if and when driveway permits are applied for, at that time and place is when the DOT will either say there has to be a third turning lane, what type arrangement done to each driveway, is that correct?
That's correct. They do a thorough investigation. There may be requirements for other enhancements or improvements. They usually send the plans and profiles to their hydrography unit down in Raleigh, and they will call in their other professionals in their Raleigh office to come and look at it for advice and before they issue that driveway connection.
Thank you. Didn't want to take away, sorry.
Okay. One of their standard answers is it's our road and we'll make adjustments to it as needed.
That's correct.
Okay. Anybody else want to
But at the same time, they're not going to put anything out there that's going to jeopardize the motoring public.
We'll give you an opportunity to respond. Okay.
Answer his question a little further.
Okay. If that's what director related to that,
Further
yeah.
to Mr. Jarvis's question, I did meet Mr. McMahon on site. We did discuss that there will have to be turn lanes installed, that we will have to work with JP Couch at the district office for the length and width of those turn lanes. We understand they'll have to be there, and we understand we're gonna have to pay for them.
One of my recommendations would be for the developer to petition the DOT to look at the, speed limit on Heggie Road, because right now it is, not posted. And we all know when you have an unposted road, you can do 55 miles an hour. But I think that the speed limit, over time, needs to be studied, and I would recommend 45 and not 55.
Right. Curve, I would, 15 would be about right.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
Good evening, I'm Cassandra Fatesky. We live at 429 Heggie Road. I thank you for the opportunity to speak. I wanted to speak now because we're discussing the traffic. I'm not sure if you guys have come down Heggie Road recently, but I live in the white farmhouse right at the very end of the curve on the other end of this. It's the equilateral, oddly shaped property. It's the third curve on the South Union Grove side, not the Hartman and Union Grove side towards 150, the other side. And there's quite a sharp curve at that end of the road. And it has come up in discussions that DOT classifies the road as a local road. And there is another company that classifies roads in the Davidson County area, and they have classified it as a collector road. Collector road is what qualifies for MXR, but DOT classifies the road differently. DOT is responsible for the care and upkeep of Heggie Road, and we're basing this zoning decision off of the road being called a collector road by not DOT. And that's something that needs to be considered. They say that the traffic isn't a big deal. They say that, well, after the fact, we can reassess. We'll build the subdivision, we'll build the development, and we'll reassess Heggie Road then. We'll see if changes need to be made. The problem with that is there are homes at stake in this. There are homes that after the fact, depending on what DOT decides, after it's all been built and done, those homes are in jeopardy. I live in one of the original homes on Heggie Road. My house was there long before DOT had this road built. It is quite close to the road. And if DOT were to decide 10 years from now, when it's all said and done, that the volume has increased to where Heggie Road needs to be widened entirely, it is quite likely that my home will be in jeopardy. It is quite likely that they will say that it is no longer safe, or it has to be completely removed for this road to be widened. It's something to be considered. It's bigger than just a turn lane down at the middle of a field. It's a family. I have 2 small children that I don't let them play in the front yard as it is, but because of the sharp curve, people frequently run off the end of the road into my driveway. We have photographs from a previous owner where people have completely missed the curve and hit the barn on our property. It's not a place that's prepared to handle an additional 1,000 cars. It's not prepared for that. Another concern that we have, because our property butts up to the back of the development, it slopes down to our property, and our property slopes down as well. Currently, there are 200 and some odd acres to absorb storm runoff and water drainage from rain. With Hurricane Michael, I noticed that there was a spot on Heggie Road that water was standing on the road, running across the road. When I went to check our creek in the back, it had almost flooded over the bridge. And that's with ground to absorb the water. Without proper management of this, the storm runoff and the drainage is going to be a problem. It's not just gonna go nowhere. Our property line, based off of the current map that is being suggested, based on the minimum standards, is gonna have 8 properties on our property line without very much yard to absorb that water. There's not going to be something to help prevent flooding in my property. It's all something that needs to be considered. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I can address some of those concerns if.
Okay.
The classification of Higgy Road comes from the Winston-Salem Metropolitan Planning Organization, of which this county is a member jurisdiction. Each time, about every 4 years, the roads in that planning jurisdiction are evaluated and classified based on the amount of volume and traffic on those roads. It is submitted to the Technical Coordinating Committee, which is made up of planners from each member jurisdiction, so that they can comment and evaluate themselves on how roads within their immediate jurisdiction are classified on the plan. There are changes made periodically if we feel like a certain road should be upgraded or even downgraded for some reason, we can make those changes. But there is a thoroughfare plan and a collector road plan that is actually adopted by the MPO and submitted to the DOT. Commissioner Crott sits on the Winston-Salem MPO. Commissioner McClure sits on the High Point MPO. So every 4 years or so, that plan is brought to the committee for adoption. And so that's where that classification of Higgy Road, currently on that thoroughfare plan, Higgy Road is identified as a collector road, and I would call it a minor collector road because of the amount of traffic that it is currently handling, it is considered to be a collector road.
But is it a collector road right now by the DOT?
Yes, it is.
By the DOT or?
And I have the definition from the DOT. A rural minor collector should have the following characteristics: be spaced at intervals to collect traffic from local roads and bring all development areas within a reasonable distance of a collector road, provide service to the remaining smaller communities, and then link the locally important traffic generators of their rural areas. That's where that definition comes from.
Okay. Ma'am, do you find something different? Is that what you're saying?
You asked specifically if DOT considers it a collector road, and they do not. All he did was cite what they consider a collector road.
Right, but are you saying DOT currently right now has that listed?
I'm saying that the Winston-Salem MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is officially recognized as the planning organization that DOT listens to, has Higgy Road identified as a collector road.
But the state DOT has not picked up on that, is that what you're?
That's probably more accurate, yes, sir.
Okay. I mean, I know we're getting into specifics. It's really not that huge right now. I mean, it is, but it isn't. But, you know, just, I see they're upset, wanted to clarify that.
Yes, sir.
That's why I'm saying that.
Yeah.
Because if DOT does not have it as that classification, it matters.
Right.
You can't have arguing people to vote on a zoning. You can't approve something that 2 companies classify things differently.
Well, and it's not companies, and what Mr. Corman is saying, and this does make sense, okay, is that in the MPO, which is the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is like we are the elected body that governs the DOT stuff. If we vote to have a series of roads reclassified up and down, whichever way it may be, DOT then has to enter that information into their system. North Carolina has one of the highest or most miles of any state in the nation, one of the highest, of state-maintained roadways. So there's hundreds of thousands or even millions of roads in North Carolina that DOT monitors. And what he's saying is they may have missed one that went from one classification to the other, but the MPO, which is the one that regulates that stuff and sends it to the state, does have it classified the right way. That's what he's saying. Somebody in the state level may have missed it. But just letting you, clarifying that for you, okay, because I know you were...
Okay, anyone else wish to speak on this matter? Come forward if you do. One more.
My name is Heather Yates Davis, and this is alluding to exactly what you guys were talking to. I just first want to say thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm grateful to be in front of you. I'm also grateful to live in a community where my voice can be heard. I'm also grateful to exercise my right as a Davidson County citizen today. I come to you, and I have emailed several of you guys on the committee with multiple complaints. I'm going to address one at the moment. And it is about the way the Metropolitan Ordinance has defined the connector road. According to MXR, it says there has to be major and minor access. If you read it, I think Michelle may read it in a few minutes, but there has to be major and minor adequate access. I think that we should go back and define what Hagee Road is first by the DOT, because it's not a connector road. It is a farm road. The DOT describes it as a local road. It is not adequate to hold 17,000 people. We had an attorney here speak to this matter. We asked if this could be addressed before we came to the county commissioners. That was on the behalf of the residents on Hagee Road. I don't live quite on Hagee Road, but I live in Wright Farm. We were ignored essentially because we specifically asked that it be defined before we got here as a local road with the DOT and the MXR or the Metropolitan Ordinance, because it said with the Metropolitan Ordinance that it could handle 17,000 cars. It said it could handle the same thing as what Hickory Tree could handle. There's no way that our small little road of 1.4 miles can handle that many cars in any way, shape, or form. Again, according to MXR, it says that there has to be access to major thoroughfares within a certain amount of distance. There's not. We don't have access to major thoroughfares such as 52 or 40 in a certain distance. It also says it has to have access to minor thoroughfares such as Peters Creek Parkway that's not close by, or to Silos Creek Parkway, or to some of the larger ones. So I stand here to argue that in my little development, in my little 1.4 mile road, that it is not, I don't care what Winston-Salem says, it is not capable of handling the amount of traffic that they say is capable through the traffic study and through what the Winston-Salem Metropolitan Ordinance says. I would ask that you postpone this until the definition is defined by the state of North Carolina and not by an ordinance that's Winston-Salem, even though you guys are a governing body. I close also by stating that as a healthcare provider in this community, I'm expected to treat an illness with a comprehensive plan. I cannot simply throw a pile of medicines at a patient and just expect to see what happens. Please, for the sake of all Davidson County citizens, exercise a comprehensive plan when it comes to regard to zoning and to our traffic on Hagee Road.
I'll say something.
Yeah.
I took the liberty of looking up in the NCDOT website here, and it seems that prior to 2008, functional classifications were stratified by area type, either rural or urban. It says, in an effort to de-emphasize the urban boundary as being a deciding factor of functional classification, the classes were redefined into one schema independent of urban or rural. The functional classes are as follows: interstate, other freeways and expressways, other principal arterial, minor arterial, major collector, and minor collector. There's no more rural classification from the NCDOT since 2008.
Thank you, Commissioner McClure. Minor collector is as low as it gets,
That's it.
That's minimum.
It goes on to say about, if you're interested in a little bit more information, you can go to the FHWA website, to pick it up.
I have a little bit more information taken from the 2007 Collector Street Plan for the Winston-Salem MPO that says in 2002, the MPO thoroughfare plan was updated and expanded to include newly identified urban area and was jointly adopted by both the MPO and the North Carolina Department of Transportation. The thoroughfare plan classifies roads into freeways, expressways, and major and minor thoroughfares to identify a finer grained street and highway system for local planning purposes. An additional classification of road type was included, collector streets. The primary function of a collector street is to gather traffic from the local residential or commercial street system and deliver it to the closest minor or major thoroughfare. Collector streets provide both local access to adjacent properties and mobility for vehicles and other modes of transportation. Collector streets are an immediate link supplying important continuity in the functional system between the local street with unlimited access and the thoroughfare roads meant to efficiently carry higher volumes of traffic at higher speeds and with limited access. Collector streets generally are designed for shorter trip lengths and have lower traffic volumes in the 1,000 to 3,000 vehicles per day range than thoroughfare, which carry more traffic. Collector streets provide alternative routes and additional circulation within the area circumscribed by thoroughfares. The increased connectivity afforded by collector streets creates safer routes for sidewalks and pedestrian, bicycles, and school buses. Additionally, response times for emergency vehicles can be reduced and the routing of transit services and public work functions such as garbage collection, recycling, and snow removal are enhanced.
Is that a whole book?
Yes.
It is. Finally, I just wanted to clarify, collector streets.
Good job, Eddie.
Balance access and mobility and provide a necessary connection between the local roads where people begin their daily trips and the roads that carry commuters to their jobs. A well-connected system of collector and local roads can relieve thoroughfares of short trip congestion, but that comes from the collector plan.
Would you repeat that, guy? I didn't get all of it.
I'm trying to watch the World Series, so.
Well, just to clarify, Guy, did you just state that collector streets should carry around 1,000 to 3,000 cars?
That's what it says generally.
Generally. So we would far exceed that once we finish building out this housing project and Sedona's project. We would certainly exceed the 3,000, correct?
It could be increased, there's no doubt about it, but at that time, then the roads would then be updated.
Hopefully, one day.
If it's classified differently, it would have to be.
Okay. Okay.
See, I didn't catch your name, I'm sorry.
Alicia Stevens, I live on 152 Cummins Court.
Okay.
I've actually emailed quite a few of you and spoke to some of you as well.
Okay.
I was the one that came a couple of weeks ago and apparently butchered the MXR coding that Mr. Barney clarified for me. But just looking at the zoning requirements for the MXR zoning, the adequate public facilities and public water and sewer service, I know that we are so appreciative of Forsyth County for allowing us to piggyback to their sewer lines, but as Mr. Crotts have already spoken and other residents from Sedona spoke a couple of weeks ago, I think Forsyth County is laughing all the way to the bank every time we write a check to them. We are not prepared as a county. If we don't even have our own sewer service that we can provide, then MXR zoning shouldn't even be here. We're not prepared. And another item in the MXR zoning is transportation facilities. To my knowledge, transportation facilities are provided in the city of Lexington, city of Thomasville. Is that? We don't have public transportation. So we're missing a lot of areas of this MXR zoning, that Mr. Lyons is here asking to be approved. Another item of contention for me is, the pricing. And I know it may not affect you as much, but it will affect my home value and the home values of everyone else in this building. If he's throwing out loose numbers of $250,000 all the way to $400,000, and the thought of someone selling a home where if you drive by and it looks like you could just spread your arms out and touch your neighbor, I just don't see how he's going to sell that for $250,000. And my fear is that he's going to have to drop that price, and we're going to be looking at a lot of lower value homes right around our neighborhood. And at the end of the day, the lower those prices, the less tax revenue for you. At RS20, where Sedona is proof that RS20 will bring you $300,000. And $350,000 was, I know, a number that was thrown out for Plan B, but no one can provide a firm number of Plan B. But tax revenue on $300,000 houses under RS20 would be more than likely than this MXR zoning, where we're not sure what the price range would be. So just a little side note, I know tax assessment is very important to you guys, but I just think it would be better for everyone on Hagee Road if we look at RS20, but even better if we looked at septic tanks. I know that's something of the past, but I pay $300 every 5 years to get my septic tank pumped. I don't pay $200 a month for a sewer line. And if these people can't afford to pay their sewer bills, what's going to happen? So I guess HOAs will cover it, but I guess HOAs will be skyrocket too. Just my concern that this is not going to sell in that area, and we're going to have to pay for it at the end. So thank you, guys.
Anyone else?
I don't believe so.
Okay, does the applicant have any additional rebuttal that he'd like to make?
Not really rebuttal, just a couple of
Or
comments.
clarification?
Pardon?
Or clarification?
Yeah, clarifications. We're more than happy to participate in petitioning the DOT to drop the speed limit to 45. We, as much as anybody behind me, I'm certain, would like to see that. We're very, very agreeable to do that and desire to do that. I'll go ahead and bring it up. If approved, I'll go ahead and bring that up from the very beginning as we interact on turn lane design and plan approval and so forth. The other, Scott. Everybody has been very well-spoken and very gracious tonight. In the most polite of terms, I would like to point out Sedona is MXR. I did that subdivision. It's going very well. That is an example of where it can and does work. It's a very nice little subdivision. I did the PDH at the top up there. That stopped for a while. I concede. I did that for a couple of gentlemen out of the Midway area. They were selling townhome pads. A few townhomes went up. Our economy tanked. I mean, 07, 08, they were terrible for me. It was personally, financially disastrous years. But it's now picked back up as the economy has recovered, what I began this evening with, and it's doing quite well. That's another nice example of how these types, that PDH was the ancestor to the MXR. That was done before we had MXR. So, you know, this is not, it's bigger. Yes, it's bigger. Therefore, it has a bigger footprint and more impact. But it is very consistent with the type of development that I have done for my clients in this county for the last 15 or 20 years. And there's two showing on the same page as the map, even though it's just a little snapshot of the county. So I did want to point that out.
Could I ask just one question? Now, I'm talking about plus 10 years, more or less, for the entire project. what happens after 10 years when you sold everything? Do you turn the property over to the homeowners association?
Yes,
And then you walk away, don't you?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Correct. We want to be there, the developer, and I as his employee want to be there actively participating until all roads are taken over by NCDOT and all of the property is owned by the HOA that is not owned fee simple underneath the homes. Yes, sir, that's correct.
As part of this application, Commissioner Truill, is he had to submit to, as part of his application, an extensive set of, he's been referring to as CCRs, and those are his covenants and restrictive covenants and agreements. And so he also has a separate document that covers all of the bylaws of how that homeowners association is to be set up and to be, how each property owner would have a vote. There'd be an architectural control committee and that kind of thing. It's all set up as part of that entire package.
Chuck, can you elaborate a little bit about how we could do this and get all of these conditions here that have been presented to us into this? Could we put that in the master plan, and would that work?
Mr. Chairman, do you want to do it, Chuck, or you want Scott to try to do that? Either way, we can.
Somebody besides me, because I don't know.
Scott, would you step up with your permission, Mr. McClure?
That's fine. We'll just take it out of your pay, being as how you're not qualified.
Well, he's already a village attorney instead of a county attorney, so.
Mr. Leonard, during the recess, I think we had an opportunity to talk because there were several things that had been brought up tonight by the proponent of this plan that are not part of the master plan that has been previously submitted to the planning board or to your office. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And those matters include, among other things, the submission of a landscaping plan, an agreement to liability for all roads until the roadways are accepted by DOT, and a request by the petitioner on DOT to re-examine the speed limit.
Those three that you mentioned were brought up tonight in a discussion with the board. The previous 9 that you have a list of are restrictions that the developer brought with him today as evidence of his good faith. He wants this to be a part of the record, but until now we really don't have a process of doing that. And in the break, we decided that in the ordinance, it does allow some level of agreement between the governing body and the developer. We don't want these to be labeled as conditions. We want these to be something that we would classify as added or additional restrictions that the developer has proposed and the board has accepted if the board decides to approve the project. To clean it up, what we would like to do is if the board wants to approve this project, you can ask for those restrictions that have been submitted to be added either on the site plan that is finally submitted to us, and you can allow the staff to require that before we sign off on it, or you can table it and have them come back and show you the evidence of it. Or you can have those 9, and we'll talk about the additional 3 in a second, those original 9, you can ask him to put that in his restrictive covenants and make sure that the staff sees those in there. The benefit of having it on the site plan is it allows him to take several of those and actually show it on the site plan. The lands that he is already planning to deed over to the adjoining property owners, he can show it. This is a plan, it's not a survey, but he can show it. That would reduce the number that he would actually have to print out. The 3 that Mr. Fry spoke of, in our hearing the discussion between the board and the developer, there was a discussion, Mr. Jarvis, about the landscaping plan. The developer here publicly stated that he typically puts a berm on the Heggie Road side to try to make it aesthetically pleasing for those first row of homes. We weren't sure if the board was taking that as an additional restriction, and we weren't sure if the developer was meaning for that to be an additional restriction. Here again, we don't want to make this conditional. We're just trying to get a clarification of how many of these restrictions does the board wish to accept. And then there was a discussion about the actual roads being taken over by the state of North Carolina. In his restrictions now, he has made a statement that the roads will be taken over by the DOT. But in the discussions, it was that he would be responsible for that. Most subdivisions, the developer goes in, builds the roads, and once the people start living in there, it's up to them to petition the road to be taken over, most of whom have no idea it's their responsibility. In the discussion back and forth, there was the thought that the developer would be willing to see that the roads, as he continued through the progress of it, be taken over, take that responsibility. And if that's going to be added as another restriction, if he's willing to include that in his 9, then that could be an additional one.
I believe you may be missing one other discussion. The section up here of taking it completely out of the MX that directly adjoins Heggie Road.
That would be part of the revision of the site plan.
That would be a revision, and also the paperwork would need to be revised to reflect that. I'm just wondering, to try to understand, would it be better if this was tabled, brought back with the revisions, with the change, especially whenever you're considering the fact that part of it's not even going to be zoned, to get it written properly, just to give time to put all of the data together and just bring it back.
If I may speak to that, that's perfectly you're right, an option. From a staff level, I would probably hesitate on taking those lots out of the MXR strictly because the MXR locks it in. The MXR is what's going to control those lots from not being built on. Once you take that out of the MXR and put it back in the RA3, they can do whatever they want. So that I would probably propose, I know the understanding of trying to not allow the development building to be on here. I think the developer was maybe putting it into park or whatever. Keeping it in the MXR would lock it in.
I do understand that.
Right. Here was my problem with that, Scott. If you leave it in MXR, the lots down here in the road that comes down, I don't have a pointer, so, all right, right there. You could have an easement to go to the 5 lots between those properties, and I know he's saying that the 2 lots, right there, that he's gonna deed that to Miss Moon. I don't know what the 3 lots, what the plan is there, but if we take it out of the MXR, even if they sold that or even if they did build a traditional home on it, just like what's sitting there, that would face Heggie Road, that would have nothing to do with the MXR, it would be different. But if you leave it in MXR, then you could actually have a road go between 2 houses here that would then connect up to the other side. So I agree with what Commissioner Jarvis is saying. If you take it out, they can deed it off, do whatever they want with the property owners there, or they could put a traditional house on it that would match those other houses and sell it off. And that way it's not part of an HOA, because I look at it and say, okay, if you've got 3 houses there now, why would you have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 other houses sitting right in the middle of them that's HOA, that's part of this other group, but they're not, or if they're facing back towards the inside of the other part, but the house next door is facing Heggie Road. And I don't want to see what we've got over here, what is it, Pilgrim? Remember that scenario?
Yes, sir.
I wouldn't want to have that issue where you're driving up to the back of the house. I understand, and I agree with you. The only thing is the board can control this by keeping it in the MXR where there is no houses there at all.
Put it in a common area?
I'm assuming that's what he was proposing possibly. I don't want to speak for Buddy.
Come up and speak in the microphone.
The only reason I wouldn't want to put it in a common element, is if we end up deeding it to the landowners. So I'm happy to add, and I think too, the requests that I've brought in combined with what you've, stated are things that we intended to do anyway, so I don't look at them as additional conditions, because we were looking at doing them anyway, so I'm happy to add them to the site plan. But, I think that if the language was such that it was either common element not to be built upon or dedicated or deeded to an adjacent landowner that is not us, then I think that would probably take care of it one or two ways. Because I think that, I could be wrong, but I think Ms. Moon would probably prefer to actually own it than it just be in common element. And that's the only reason that I wouldn't just flat out say you can't do things with it. So I think by saying that it either gets deeded, to an adjacent property owner, not us, or it remains in common element, either way it takes away the prospect of it getting built on, would be my vote.
I got a question for you, Scott. If you want to leave everything else in the MXR and just cut straight across behind the white lots, just straight across,
Yeah.
not the whole area, just those lots. I don't believe common area would be very well, because then it would be the homeowners association's responsibility to keep them mowed and upkept and the upkeep on them. So if you're gonna deed this property to these property owners, give them something they can use later. They might wanna build their grandchildren a home or some of their kids or whatever. So I'd hate to see it restricted. So like I say, if anything, just cut it off at the bottom at the white would be my recommendation.
That was what I thought we were discussing
Right,
originally.
And I see heads shaking about that, and here's the idea. If you leave it MXR, even if it gets deeded to somebody else and sold, anybody else could buy it. They haven't said they wouldn't put a driveway on Higgy Road. So when you leave it MXR, then you create problems for the future. But if you take that part out, then whatever may happen, it'll have to be a traditional home. So that's why I see head shaking, so that's why I was just,
Can we have the developer respond to that?
Yeah, and the only reason, I would be happy to go ahead and state that it just gets deeded. The only reason that wouldn't happen is if for some reason she comes to me and says, I spoke to my CPA and we just don't think it's wise for some reason. So if they're willing to do it, then I can unequivocally say that it might just be easiest to go ahead and do it that way.
all right, what about the other 3 lots that you've got there? 'Cause I know Miss Moon's gonna take those too, but those other 3.
Yeah, so she, she told me that her son lives out there, and so my thought is that there's additional neighbors out there.
Yeah, I'm talking about the other 3.
Yeah, and that's, in that case, I think that saying, it gets, I hate to be up here and just say everyone gets a lot, but, if they, we're not gonna there's no use for it for us.
Right.
Really, so if those neighbors wanted it, or
Right, that's what I was asking. Have you talked to those neighbors about them?
No, I don't know who those residents are.
Is anybody that lives here? Okay, that's you?
I have talked to her.
No, he said, she said.
Okay, yeah, we can't have the he said, she said. I was wondering if there was somebody that lives there.
Robert and Janet Holdaway live next to those 3 lots.
Okay, all right. But you could work that out, yeah.
Yeah, and two, I mean, it's not gonna function well for us as common element, and we don't think it's a good place for a lot anyway, so I think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Once you defer ownership, though, you don't have any say-so with what they do with it, though, do you? And then we're right back to square one about the driveways coming out on Hagee Road.
Well, we could add a deed restriction to it, but, I think in that case, the people that live out there currently that's tough. The people out there that live out there currently have the right to do with their property what they wanna do. We could certainly add conditions to that.
Well, see, I'm saying if you left it alone like it is, because if you zone it MX, then you could have 3 different lots there. But if you leave it as it is and don't rezone it, then it would just be, what is it, RA1?
3.
RA3? Then that's what it would be. It would be just as it is now.
If I can weigh in, we've done some preliminary survey, and I've met Mr. Kleinard, I believe Mr. Holdaway. If he's not a relative, he's a friend, but he's willing to deed this to these adjoining people who already live there. I concur that the simplest thing to do is to draw a line there, take that portion out of MXR and not rezone that portion. He'll deed it to them, and they can expand their yards or have a lot for a child, assuming it might or might not perk. Whatever might have been if we had never showed up would be the situation. He's very gracious to be willing to deed them. I think that's good. mechanism. And
DOT will control the driveway entrances, whether.
DOT will evaluate for sight distance, and they'll have to be applied to if you get it right. And I would respectfully request, just for the sake of expediency, I think
Excuse me just a
everybody.
second. We got a guy speaking from the podium. I'm sorry.
I would respectfully request, just for the sake of expediency, everybody here has been so well-spoken, and everybody's been very gracious. We've had disagreement, but it's all been very cordial, and this is our third meeting, and I would just respectfully say that if you're choosing to move forward with this, I think it is it's an unusual situation, but Mr. Leonard has presented it as an option that you can say that you would like these conditions incorporated into and onto a site plan that is brought to Mr. Cornman, whom I'm sure you trust very much for his, and Mr. Fry's consistency with what's been spoken about tonight, before they give us formal staff permission to proceed. So I would request, if you're inclined to proceed, that might be the easiest for you folks as well as all of us, and I appreciate your consideration.
The one problem that I have about trying to move specifically to a decision tonight is we always have a specific acreage figure as to what we're creating for that particular district. Unless Mr. Coe, has those numbers in his head where we could specifically nail it down in a motion. If the board is inclined to move forward, then, staff needs to, so that we can clearly, know what this district is gonna be, so.
If I may add to that, Guy, I'm all for expediency, but I'm uncomfortable now, for several reasons, because once we start taking property out of the planned rezoning area, now we're losing lots which affect our sewer allocation that you have before you. I'd have to come back, and I want something that's approved in front of you with their proper number of lots. I would feel more comfortable, and I don't want to hold up anyone. We can even put it on your consent agenda for the 13th. It doesn't matter, but I would rather have the completed project come back, and we can bring it back even if it's just for consent. And I'm not sure if that's the right way to go, but that way we have a final product with the restrictions placed on it, with the portions taken out of it. We have an accurate sewer allocation figure in front of you, because that will need to be approved at the same time. And right now, I'd have to say I have to subtract 5 homes right now, and I would feel better having everything completed in front of you. I know that's 3 weeks away, and I apologize to the developer, but that would be my suggestion.
I think it's a prudent move to make sure that we have all the information that we need. I would make a motion that we do that we have the developer get with the staff, make all the changes that we have seen, and then on the 13th, have the staff bring it back to us and present it. And I will put that in form of a motion. It's not that I don't want to
Do we need to close the hearing to make that for that motion, or we need?
I think we closed.
No, sir. I'm sorry.
Can the motion be made during the public hearing, or should we close the public hearing to make the motion?
You want to go ahead and, as a formality, sir, if you want to close the public hearing.
Okay. At this point, considering we're gonna temporarily close the public hearing, to entertain a motion, Commissioner McClure.
Yes, the motion that I make is that all of the changes be incorporated, in a site plan, the areas that are gonna be taken out, would be taken out, the total square footage and the amount of sewer that's being allocated, will be in a definite manner, will be brought back to the staff. The staff would then make sure, along with our attorney, that it was a legal situation that we have done and that we know what we're voting on. And then we vote on the 13th. And my apologies, I know y'all have been through 2 planning and zoning meetings, but we want to make sure that we have what we have before we make a move on it.
Thank you. I don't have an issue with it going on the consent agenda at that point in time. I mean,
I was wanting to make that because, so we don't have another public hearing type thing. If you want another public hearing, we need to set it, but if not a public hearing.
Have you got the direction from the motion as to where you need to go with this?
Yes.
Okay. All right, do we have a motion by Commissioner McClure? Do we have a second?
Second.
I've got a second by,
Is this gonna be put on consent or what?
well, I think we
Or
can terminate
continue?
It's just-
between now and then.
Okay.
We can pull it off if we wanna pull it off.
Okay.
All right, got a motion by Commissioner McClure and a second by Commissioner Jarvis. No other discussion, cast your vote.
The votes are in.
Mr. Chairman,
Now motion carries 7-0.
Mr. Chairman, can I speak for a second? Is that okay? Just a quick second. I understand the issues here. I've went out there and I've checked the road out. I've looked at the area, and it is one of the most beautiful areas I think I've ever seen. I mean, absolutely beautiful. I think he's put together a nice plan, but I do understand the concerns, and that's why we brought some of that up today. Hopefully we've got some of your neighboring stuff taken care of, and fixed some of the issues about the leasing property and investments and stuff. But it was a tough one for me to look at, cause I'd like to see that just as a farm, but anyway.
Would you like a motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman?
I just wanna reiterate what, Commissioner, Crotts has said. Thank you. Commissioner Crotts has said, we just wanna make sure we got this thing right. We don't want you to leave it here and say, well, how they gonna fix it? They probably don't even remember what they said, so we want it put in right, and we want it done right, so that when it comes back before us, we can have all the facts before us. But thank you guys for caring enough about your community to come tonight. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.